The teacher used video messages. And this again, they're doing this already within a couple of weeks, right? My son typed dictation and used board maker, cut out the items, placed in correct order. He was learning with his peers, working on personal goals, hashtag inclusion, hashtag UDL. And I just loved this example because, well, one of the funny things was she called me and she said, in case you're wondering about the status of Six Flags on April 6th, it's closed for the coronavirus. And this is one of his special interest areas, is Great America. So for him, that was really, central to his engagement, was to get to talk about that and reflect on that. But what I thought was really nice about this is teachers were immediately going into this mode of, in this particular instance of, we're not going to just, throw out the progress that we have made and the ideology that we have worked for, that by hook or by crook, inclusion is going to happen here. And so they thought about ways to help, him participate in those assignments. We're going to look at lots of other examples, of course. But I just thought, what a lovely example of a team just within days, just started putting all those practices in place, as we have done around the country. And so this is something I think that's so helpful to pass on to everybody that we work with. Inclusion is alive and well, or at least it can be. We don't have to let go of that. Kind of with Pam's keynote, we can't be face to face, but we can be together. And I think that's really critical to kind of at the heart of this presentation today. So I will tell you a little bit about myself, and then I'll talk a little bit about the presentation itself, because it's kind of a big one. So this is me, and you can see there's my evolution. There's in the top is kind of what we used to do. And now what am I doing? Same as you all, sitting in front of my computer, teaching. And we have to adapt right along with everybody that we work with. A couple of things you should know about me. And there's a whole lot you don't need to know to engage in this presentation, but I wanted to give you a one-stop shop, and that's my website. So if you go to paullakluth.com, that will bring you to a little bit of a longer, bio about me, some things that you might want to know. There are some articles I want to sort of have you attend to, because these are resources that we may be looking at. So here's the site. There's always like a little tip of the day there. But the thing that I'm going to talk a lot about, there's a blog. I don't use that too much for new content, but there's a few things here, including a little inclusion planning tool there. But the thing I'll probably allude to the most is this purple pencil. So every now and then I may speak about some readings. And these are just all free resources that you can grab. If these kinds of resources are the kinds of things that your teachers might use, I'm just going to give a little plug for signing up for the newsletter here. I don't sell it or give it away to anybody, and I only send out a note every couple of months. But the reason for that is the website is completely changing, getting a facelift. It's going to look very different and operate very differently in about 2 weeks. So if you want to get notification about what new is, coming down the pike, you can definitely give us your information, or just make a note to come back and check out some of those kinds of things. So I'm not going to talk too much more about all those different pieces. If I go through a resource, you can't remember what I said, or you're not sure what I said, this is where you can find some of the books and the orange pencil there. So you can check that out. I think that's everything. And those are sort of the links to social media, some of the places that you can find me. Some of the things that will be helpful for us to be thinking about during this time is considering how we can make use of some of these resources that are out there in new ways, because now we're all kind of on the internet all day long. So we want to make sure that our teachers know what free stuff is out there and what kinds of things can help them in this journey. I've written a lot about this. I used to be a school teacher. I was an inclusion facilitator, as a co-teacher, those kinds of things. I taught K-12. My certification is in complex disability, what we would now call complex support needs, what we called back in the day severe and profound disability. And then, of course, over the course of working in inclusive schools as a teacher and as a consultant, as a professor of ed, now I've taught about everything. And I've evolved in first talking about kids with lots of need, and then now universal design and kind of much more general practices. And so 3 of the books that I'm going to be focusing on today are Universal Design Daily, and I actually have some copies of that to give away today, because that's going into a new edition soon. Don't We Already Do Inclusion, which is something I presented last year at the conference, and I'll be picking parts of that. And then you're going to love this kid, which is the first textbook that I ever wrote. And because this is new content, new material in many ways, I had to pull from everywhere, to kind of say like, how are we going to re-envision this? So those are just some resources, a little bit about me. I have two daughters myself. I have two teenage girls who are going to be learning at home this year. So that's, some of this I approach as a parent as well as somebody that works with teachers a lot. Mostly now I do this. I used to be a professor, most recently at Syracuse University. And now I'm mostly doing this. I do in-service work, and I mostly work with schools and do this kind of work for educators that are already in the field. So it's going to be a year of learning for so many of us, even though we have many years of experience in the classroom. A little bit about the session itself. I want to invite you to, I've been on this conference for several days now, so I know that it's a lot to be doing this and trying to get your other things done. So I will just say some things that I think might help your learning and the engagement and getting the most out of it is, if you can, connect and engage. If I'm asking for comments, don't be shy. It just really helps me to know I'm just speaking to somebody. Yes, you know how odd it can be. I'm sure you've all been on the other end of that. So if you can contribute and your hand isn't with a toddler, or you're not on a call or something like that, I would love to hear from you, and there'll be some different times for that. But even during the session, if you want to throw something out there, an example resource. Also, please feel free to adapt. And one of the things I always say in the name of UDL is that you probably know that it's a little bit hard to multitask during this. And I was trying to I hadn't intended to go to the conference all day yesterday, but I thought, oh, I'll go all the way to the end, but I can still do these other things. And of course, I couldn't do two because I kept listening in. So if you do want to multitask and you do want to get things done, my little hack is multitask by doing things like getting a lot of water in today. And I'll cue you. When you see me drinking water, you can drink water. It'll help with your potential fatigue as the day goes on. It'll help with your feeling of wellness and alertness. So that's one thing. You can stretch, do some of those things. So that's what I've been trying to do, is like, okay, maybe I can do a little pacing here. And so that's how I'm multitasking. It might help a little bit. So if you can close some of the tabs, great. If you can't, I understand. And, just get out of it as much as you can. And then finally, I'm going to be reminding you to look for three things today. So I'm going to tilt this up a little bit. So the three potential outcomes I think that you might be able to take away are: one idea to use, so something that you can implement right away, whether that's in a mini PD that you're going to do for your teachers, or you're going to make a phone call to a family member, or you're going to potentially plan for some resources to be brought in, any of those things. So what's something you can do? The second is, what's something today that you can share? So if I give you a resource that you really like, you might say, I want my families to have this. Or maybe there's a part of the session that you really want to share with your entire leadership team. And maybe that's a little lunch bunch that you want to have. So pay attention to something that you'd like to share. And then finally, what's a good resource? So as we talk about, maybe it's a person that you're connecting with here. Maybe it's a book, maybe it's a website, maybe it's some kind of a tool, because we're going to talk about UDL in the third segment here. So maybe it's some kind of a tool that you can use. So I'm going to kind of come back to that and just remind you, if nothing else, to keep track of how you can make this actionable. Maybe have some sticky notes in front of you. What's something I can use? What's something I can share? What's a resource I can take away? So just a suggestion. You may have your own way of doing that as well, and I understand and respect that. Okay, so fantastic. So the other reminder is that there are notes, and I don't know, maybe Chris can repost those for us. We've got 2 sets of notes here. So if you want to see a template for the notes today, it's not every single slide, but it's sort of an outline. There are 2 versions that we can get in the chat, and they'll be in the chat for you. One is what I call a large print version, so it's just 2 slides per page. The other has 6 slides per page. And so you can grab one of those if you think that would be helpful to you. Okay. All right, I think perfect. Thank you so much for that. Okay, and thanks for the reminder about our work. All right, so the very last thing is I am going to follow the schedule of the conference. So when everybody else is taking a break and your colleagues are taking a break, we're going to take a break. And we'll come back, and each segment will have its own theme. So in case you want to plan, this segment is really about, very much about inclusive education and what we know about the research in placement and how we can lean into that with this virtual experience. The second is going to be about research around student potential, what we now know about what inclusion does for learners, and why we need to think very seriously about making changes now in inclusive schools that will stay down the road, that don't erode after we get through this. And session 3 is going to be about what it looks like to hang on to UDL with your life right now and not let go. And one of the slides in that section essentially says if you're going to strike while the iron's hot with UDL, the iron's not going to get any hotter. So that third section, I'm going to talk all about why we want to pour this into our PD this year, into every message, into our faculty meetings, our signage, why this is the time to talk about UDL and what kinds of messages we can send. At the very end of the day, I'm going to talk about specifically about self-determination and how that sort of language in disability can now be shopped out to general education, if you will, and how we can use that as a tool to get through this, and a tool for all students. And then we'll do some reflection at the end as well. So there'll be plenty of time for breaks. We'll remind you to hydrate and all those good things. And I'll take you through some breaks as well. All right. All right, so let's get going. All right, so I have this SNL character up here. Dare I say, we've spent several days talking about so much that we're worried about, right? But in your initial poll, I saw a lot of you were saying, look, there's a lot of enthusiasm at my campus, or at least some, and people are seeing potential opportunities here. So let me ask you this. Let's spend just a minute, and not only because it will help our conversation, but some of you may want to bring this question back to your staff. What do you like or even love about virtual education? And you can just type in the chat as many ideas as you can in, say, a minute. You can either say things that you yourself like about it, like I've been able to reach more people for me because taking the travel days out of my schedule. So I've been able to collaborate and connect with a lot more people. So you can say things that you like or things that you can see as benefits for students. So just if we could get even like 10, 12, even 20 ideas, what do you actually like or even love about virtual education? Innovation as a mindset. Some kids like being self-paced. Great. Opportunities for many ways to participate. Yeah, forced flexibility. That's absolutely right. Keep it coming. Good. More choice. I absolutely think that's true. Collaboration in general. Yes. We can work with staff more frequently. You can probably get into classrooms in ways that you couldn't before, right? I'm able to work one-on-one. I'm really connecting with families. Yeah, I love that. Oh my gosh, Terry, that's so great. More communication with families. Isn't that funny? I mean, I've heard that so many times. I had one teacher say to me, I was talking about doing home visits with kids who are the most vulnerable. And somebody said, I started doing those and I can't believe I've never done them before. She was just doing porch visits basically when it started to get nice out. Some kids do better academically with less distraction, right? And for some kids, home can be more distracting. That's true of us and work too, but for some kids, it's less distracting. Yeah. I love these. Yes, Flipgrid has given kids with limited communication opportunities to participate. Love that one. And there's so many like that, right? Zoom has some of those qualities too. Maybe you don't want me looking at you, but I can chat in the comments. Reduce social demands or qualitatively shifting what the demands look like. So maybe I can be more social in something like Edmodo or Flipgrid, and even our classroom blog where we don't have to look at each other and have these really direct in the moment conversations. Great. I love that what Stacy's saying, greater parent involvement in what their students are doing. Great. Excellent. Yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about how parents are getting a front row view to some of this. Yeah, so I'm going to keep going, but keep those coming if you'd like to, because I think this is an important question to ask our teachers. And just talk about, just as we said this morning in Pam's talk, it's more important to think about the story that we tell and to really think if we expect them to lean into inclusion at this time. Yeah, great attendance to IEP meetings for sure. If we expect them to lean in, then we have to focus on what are some of these, not just benefits, but I mean, truly, some elements of this are like the dream that we've always had. Like, wouldn't it be great if we could have, you know, an IEP meeting with these different individuals who never seem to be able to be available because, you know, the art teacher can't always do it. And we had that great teacher from last year. Maybe now they can come for just a few minutes because all they have to do is jump over to the meeting. So those kinds of things may be helpful. So keep thinking about that and think about if that's something that you would like to pass on. Okay, so the two things I'm going to talk about in this segment are thinking about is we sort of embrace this idea that you know, kids are that there are some kids that are benefiting and that there's some ways we can benefit. I want to parlay that into two recommendations in this first segment. The first one is this idea of inclusion as a process, which is the thing I talk about probably the most. If you were at my keynote last year, I talked about this a lot. And then I'm going to talk about something about how we can make our move. Those are the two messages. So the first one is inclusion as a process. And this has never been more true, right? So I want to take this from the micro level and then scope it out to sort of this larger picture. So let's just start by talking about how we understand what inclusion is. And that's a really important question to ask our staff members. Like, to us, what is inclusion? So I always use this example. Have you ever had somebody say, and you can just type yes in the comments if you know, just to respond, but have you ever heard a teacher say at your school or anywhere, maybe it was you when you were teaching, we tried inclusion, but it didn't work. We tried inclusion, but it didn't work. And I hear that a lot. You know, I hear it whether it's something that's, you know, some kind of a contentious meeting, or I might hear it just from the inside from, you know, maybe we're doing some kind of workshop or something with teachers. We tried inclusion and it didn't work. And one of the things that I think is such a powerful tool, whether you're, you know, just meeting one-on-one with a teacher or you're just presenting this as a framework, is to ask teachers this question. And the question is, what is your it? And you might want to just jot that down. What is your it? I'm going to type it right in here. What is your it? And I don't mean that you should say this in a way that's, you know, severe, but we do need to think about a shared definition. So if I say I tried getting him in there and it just wouldn't work, what you have to have a way of saying, what exactly did you try? Oh, well, we had a paraprofessional with her. Well, maybe that wasn't exactly what she needed, or maybe she needed augmentative communication support, and maybe there was, you know, some peers that needed to understand how to support her and connect with her, and maybe that curriculum wasn't adapted enough, and you know, we could go on and on. But we really need to have a way of saying that within district, which is, tell me exactly for that student what is your it, and to say it in a way that feels okay to people. Okay, so here's what I tried, and could it be that we just didn't get to the right constellation of supports? And when you look at the federal law, that range of supports and services, and I always say any judge worth their salt will never accept a first, you know, version of that. So if you said, well, I tried this, and this, most judges will say in some way, shape, or form, when those things didn't work, then what did you try? This should be a process. So that's what I mean. Inclusion is not a place. It's not a place we go. It's the work that we do. And it's understanding that when districts have really big numbers, and you know who they are, when districts have really big numbers, it's often because they have a process orientation to their work. So that in some places, and in whole counties and states even, you know, we might understand inclusion as a place. We try to get kids in those spaces, but if it doesn't work, then we look at other placements. Or you could look at it in this way, that it's over, under, around, or through, find a way, or make a way. When that doesn't work, we go back to the drawing board. We ask another set of questions. In other words, we're really reflective in the process. And I will guarantee you that and we all know this, right? There's a district near you right now that is either has a reputation for being more or less inclusive than your district. Right? I mean, you don't have to name names. You don't have to, you know, figure out which ones they are or if they're greater or less than. All I'm saying is I could do this so easily in every place I've ever lived. We all know that it's an uneven profile. There are some districts next to us within a mile that have a vastly different understanding and approach to inclusion. And so that message is really important, maybe more important than any other message for all teachers to understand, is that we have these great swooping differences between not just schools, but even between states. And that is evidence that some places have more of a process orientation. I can bet you that places with really high numbers where kids are getting, where there's a lot of kids getting into those inclusive classrooms for a lot of time, that there's a way of asking that question over and over again. When you tried this and that didn't work, then what did you try? Could we go back and look at this? Where are we seeing that we're making progress? How do we build on that? And it's sort of seen as this cycle. And so, and you see it in lots of different ways. So I feel like that is the crux of a lot of this work, no matter what environment we're in. And it's going to be more important than ever to say, if you try inclusion virtually, and it's really hard for some kids, what are all the ways in which we can change that up to potentially make it work? Because I think you probably agree with me, we've never been in a better situation to be creative, right? A lot of the barriers we used to have are gone. New ones may be in their place, but some of these bigger challenges are actually eliminated in this new way of being. So let me tell you a little story, then I'm gonna give you my little visual if you haven't seen me talk about this. I use The Price is Right because I was watching TV one day and I thought, this is the best explanation of it that I've ever seen. What is your it? It's called the race game. And what it is it's a game where you are given these 4 prizes, and it, you know, sometimes it's really hard things. You know, it'll be like a really fancy freezer, you know, with all these great digital controls, and you've probably never seen one before, or a golf cart that's shaped like a golf ball. That was actually one of the prizes. I've never seen one. How am I supposed to know how to do this? So they give you the 4 items, and then you have 4 price tags, and you have to run frantically between these different hooks, and you have to assign the right price to the right item. And the problem is, while you're doing this, there's some checkpoints. You can go and you can kind of check your work. But as you check your work, this mechanism will tell you, this image will tell you how many you have right. Did you have 2 out of 4 right? But it doesn't tell you which ones are right. So you have to kind of keep experimenting until you get it right. And I was watching this one day and I said, well, this is exactly like inclusive schooling. You know, we don't always know if we're getting it right. We have a sense that some are right. And it was very much like the work I was doing in classrooms with kids. So I would, you know, when I was a school teacher, I would have a student, it would be a challenge to work with this student, and we would just finally get one thing right. Like I had one student and it's like, okay, finally, I would have like, he could sit in the classroom for like 30 minutes or 40 minutes or 50 minutes. I'd say, do you think it's the peer thing? Do you think it's that he has this technology? Do you think it's that we're using courses? But it was like my administrator would say, okay, let's go back to the drawing board. This kid kept running out of the classroom, sometimes out of the school. We weren't locking all the doors in those days, and running down the street. I mean, it happened more than once. And I remember my administrator saying to me, all I can tell you is this is not a sign that he can't be included, but it is a sign that we need to make running the right answer. So how can running be the right answer? So we just sat down and we said, well, you run in gym and you run at recess, and maybe we need more brain breaks in the classroom, whatever we called it. And so we let him have more time with other kids. We let him stay in the playground longer and be with other classes. We increased how much physical education he had for a time. He had some jobs that were really active, and he engaged in those with kids without disabilities. So it was like that kind of a process of like, okay, now he's doing a little bit better. We're seeing that's making, it doesn't look perfect, but we're got to a better problem. And that's what I mean by a process. We got to a better problem now. And so we just kept incrementally kind of working on that picture. And then years later, you know, we were getting pretty good at this. And I had a new student come in, and an older kid who was really starting, you know, I just went to his home. I did a home visit with them. He had come once to visit the school, and he was giving me a run for my money. A lot of kicking, biting, not too much reliable communication. And I thought, oh my gosh, maybe I finally, you know, we've included all these kids successfully. Maybe we've met somebody that maybe this is the kid, you know. But I had these wonderful administrators who kind of, you know, they were convinced that we were going to, you know, find our it. And so I thought, well, this is the writings on the wall. I better figure it out. So I started developing, okay, so what do I know about kids so far, especially kids on the spectrum? So he's going to need some fidgets, and he's going to need our OT to do push-in, and he's going to need some technology. And, I started setting things up, but it didn't go as planned. And I want to show you the visual first, and then I'll tell you the end of the story. But as I'm playing this, if you could just throw a couple of comments in the chat, how does this image and this metaphor remind you of the work that you do, or that I do, or that teachers do every single day in our classrooms? We'll get Pat, there's the prizes.
For $3,000. All you have to do is put them in the right place. And after you put the price tags down, you're going to run back here and pull this lever. That'll tell you how many you have. Keep going. You hear that ding, ding, ding sound. Now, here's a little tip for you. A lot of times people want to look at their friends to see if they're right, but that wastes precious time. My advice is to throw the cards up there, push the lever, throw the cards, push the lever, get as many chances as you can to get the right combination. Okay, Mark, you ready? Go. 3,000 for the TV, 2,029 for the accessories, 549 for the beverage set. 1,000. Let's go. Two right. Let's switch those two up. Back here. 30 seconds left. Oh no, wait. One right. You got one right. 20 seconds left. He had two right before. Now he has one right. He's pretty positive about the TV. Two right. You got 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3. You got it. You got it.
A little good news in our day. We need it, right? So just throw a couple of comments in there. Extend the metaphor with me. How is this like our work? Yes, it does feel like we're teaching with our hair on fire. And to get engaged, absolutely, we have to get kids engaged. We have to do this. I don't think the energy of that's going to change when we're doing things virtually. We're still going to have to go back to the drawing board a lot of different times. And I think that, that persistence, Whitney, is absolutely part of it, that we don't hang the tags, even when it seems like, listen, we've included 100 kids with cerebral palsy, so we know what the tags look like, and you hang your tags and you come up with a 0. You can't assume that we can't include kids with multiple disabilities. And Jennifer says, keep trying, all of those things. And I like what Marsha's saying too, focus on the things that are right and not wrong. Those aren't just platitudes. I think they are incredibly powerful in this work, and they're necessary. So you're going right to the trap that I put myself in with this student. We had not only successfully included many kids with autism by the time he got to us, but we had been known, gotten, we became a lighthouse. Everyone was visiting our school, and I was such a young teacher. I felt so great about myself. I was patting myself on the back, like, I'm so great at this. And my principal was giving me an award, completely invented award, but I loved it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, we're so good at this work. So by the time Frankie got there, I had too much confidence. And I always say, sometimes if you are a district that's known for inclusion and you're really good at this, that can be a place of danger, right? Because you can get seduced in the way that I was seduced, which is if anybody could, first of all, nobody else around us was including kids like that. So it was easy to sit back and, rest on our laurels. But the other piece was, because we had a reputation around this, it would have been easy in some senses to say, well, surely we would know if he can be included because we've included all these other kids, right? So we're kind of experts in knowing, when to open the door and when to shut it. And I think, thank God, my team, my administrators were wonderful and didn't feel that way, or didn't let on, because I think in the back of my mind, I was thinking, I found the kid. This is the kid. And, and I was wrong. I was wrong. And I continued to be wrong until I finally figured out that that's not how this works. That we need to stop thinking about, we can include those kids and we can include this particular kind of learner, and we're an inclusive school, but you don't mean those kids over there, and of course I do mean those students. This is not easy work, but it's necessary. We're going to go more into that and some of the research that we can use to that end. But when he came in, I started giving him things that I would give to other kids. I gave him, my assistants were screaming, what do you want us to do? And I'm saying give him the fidgets, and we had all these fidgets and shaped like trains. Oh, he doesn't like trains. It's like, what do you mean doesn't like trains? I figured all the other kids like trains, and he likes generators. Oh my gosh, find him a windmill. I don't know. I'm telling him, get the OT. Like, we already have the OT. Get the speech path. We already have the speech path. I said, get the guy that works in the office that's fixing the Xerox machine. You know, like, I mean, we just scrambled. I was saying, get the piece of, you know, those days we didn't have an iPad, you know, but I remember being at a school that about 4 years ago, and iPads were new to this school for having lots of access. And so I said, give him the iPad. We'll be right there. He's having a hard time. And they said, well, no, he doesn't like the iPad. I said, what do you mean? And they said, well, he likes this show called Mad Men, you know, about 1960s offices. I said, I know the show. Yeah. So he likes typewriters. I said, oh my gosh, find the oldest teacher in the building. I don't know where we're going to find that. I mean, you go over, you spin, maybe you have one, maybe one. Which one is it? Is it that the fidgets maybe did still work, or that we got those preferred peers? Oh, he doesn't really prefer the peers that we got. Oh my gosh, you know, so you're always shifting. And that is, I always say that it's really important that we understand having a rough start, or having lots of barriers and having lots of obstacles, and the fact that it doesn't fit right away, and not sort of seeing what the it looks like, how the it sort of is shaking out in a positive way, I should say. It does not mean the person's not a candidate for inclusion. It just means that it's October. You know, I think that those kinds of conversations are critical, because as I said, when you look at the difference in numbers between this district and this district, that is undoubtedly the difference. The kids do not look different in these different counties and states, especially to account for some of the digits that we have. So here, as we stay with this micro level of the classroom, I just wanted to give you one tool. So if you're looking for a resource, for some of you, this could be a resource. It's on the website, that purple readings pencil that I showed you. It's called 20 Ways to Adapt the Science Lab is in that tab. And so is 20 Ways to Adapt the Read Aloud. And I always say that what's on those forms is not important. The 20 ways idea is important. So I always just say there's got to be 20 ways to do this. That's just sort of a mantra. So that if we're going to have virtual morning meetings and we want to get all kids in those, instead of trying to get Jose fit into this model and it doesn't seem to be fitting, and how can we tweak it, let's just sort of generate what are all the ways in which kids could participate in a virtual morning meeting. And then we don't have to wait for this kid. Every time we have a kid, you know, struggling, we'll just kind of, you know, we've done that work. And I don't even mean that physically you have to create all these lists and post them somewhere. That you can. You don't have to do 20, you can do 10. I think the process though, when you know, a leader saying, listen, there's 20 ways to do that, you know, just that mentality that over, under, around, or through, there is a way in. What are the 20 ways to do music lessons virtually? What are the 20 ways that we're going to do the, you know, even if it's the spelling bee, but that we start to form structures in our schools, in our classrooms, that are what we call elastic. So that, for example, round robin reading that many of us grew up with, not elastic, doesn't have a lot of give. Whereas something like Daily 5 or guided reading, some of those stations, centers, those have more give, they have more pull. And so kids are not flexible. They don't have a lot of give and pull, right? So we have to make the structures, we have to help the structures to accommodate them. So if you want to bring this back to a 20-minute meeting with your staff and just do a little bit of work every now and then, one thing you can do, and this is something I've done, is say, hey, here's what a 20 ways list is. Let's all pick a repeating structure in an inclusive classroom, and let's brainstorm just for a couple of minutes with a partner. What are 20 different ways that all kids can participate in physical education warm-ups? You know, whatever it is. So it's just a kind of a tool that we can use to get people understanding the larger picture of over, under, around, or through. All right, now I want to scope up. Now I want to talk about the big picture and why I talk so passionately and so often about this work in the way that I do. This is a study by Jennifer Kurth. She's at Kansas University. And this study's only a couple of years old, about 4 or 5 years old. And what she did was she looked at the state-to-state discrepancies. And if you've seen that data lately, you know there are some states like Illinois, where I live, where we include kids with intellectual disabilities about, you know, less than 10% of the day. So we very few kids, I should say less than 10% of the students with intellectual disabilities get included for most of the day. And you have other states that are well over 50%. The kids are not different, and we have great variability in many of these categories, including when you look at data around separate schooling and many different categories. So what Jennifer wanted to do was she wanted to look at that data and say, what's happening here? And so the most important part of this study is, and you can kind of see it there in the image, where she says, states in the Eastern United States tend to have more restrictive placements than states in the Western United States. And she talked about funding was found to have a minimal impact on outcomes. And that's usually the first thing teachers think. Oh, it must be about money. So this is an important piece. The other thing, though, that's important is she says the variation between states is often, if you talk to teachers and you ask them, what do you think is happening when you see these big discrepancies? They'll say, oh, it's funding. And then they'll say, oh, it's probably, some kids, maybe kids get different placements because of their IQ or their IQ digit or their adaptive behavior, those kinds of things. But what Jenny found, and it's clear from the data itself, is the variation suggests that factors beyond IQ digits play a major role in placement decisions. And what we find is that not only do understandings of inclusion itself play a role, but so do understandings of how we do things around here. Culture is really important about, how do we do things around here? What's the norm in this county or this district? And more pointedly, you can even say, if you look at these maps of states, that it is far more, zip code is far more predictive than something like IQ. So if you said to me, here's a child with a disability, do you think he'll be included in the school year? I would ask more about where he lives than I would ask about how he presents, in a sense, right? I'd say, tell me where he lives, and I'll make a pretty good guess about whether or not he's included. So that's called the myth of clinical judgment. And you don't take my word for it, just look at that federal data or look at the statewide data. The myth of clinical judgment says a lot of teachers, especially those that are new, look at these, referrals, and they look at these meetings and they think, oh, kids get their placements based on you collect some data and I collect some data and you do an observation and I do an observation. And together we look at that objectively and then we make a placement recommendation. But the truth when you look at the data itself is that that is a myth, that clinical judgment's a myth, that kids are getting these placements based on the decision making, not just at the district level, but also at the IEP table itself. This is a more recent study from Don Cardinal and Megan Cozier and Audrey Sandoval and Shane Brophy as well in California. And what they found was that not only was there major discrepancies from area to area, county to county, but they found that placement was significantly related to race and expenditure in some way. So a little bit different than what Jenny found, but he did find some patterns in expenditure. And he said what was interesting was that, they didn't really know in what direction they could attribute that, only that it wasn't the only factor necessarily, and that the discrepancies were pretty significant. They had this sort of gorgeous map that they have used in their teachings around this. But I was really struck by this sentence, specifically when the percentage of Black students with disabilities increased, inclusion decreased in that space, and then exclusion increased. And this is really important because I think we are, and I hope that we are renewing our commitments around social justice and some of these inequities, not just happening in the larger culture, but in our schools. And so we can't separate these two things. We know that not only may this be related to what resources a place may have, but also, how many advocacy groups are near there, who has a lawyer and who doesn't have a lawyer. And so these things come together, that kids aren't just getting access based on those profiles, but all of these other facts and figures, and so many of them related to our own decision making. As I sit at the table, what am I advocating for? Am I understanding inclusion as a cycle? Am I understanding my need to stand up and say, especially at this time, we're going to go all in. We're going to lean into what's happening because we see major inequities. even the international community now is talking about this as a human rights issue, that we have so many kids, especially with the most complex needs. Mary Morningstar did a piece about 5 years ago where she talked about kids with extensive support needs. Their placements in general ed have not changed in about 10 years. I mean, and it's not okay. It's absolutely not okay, especially when you see the data that I'm going to bring to you in the second part of this presentation. So here are some things to think about. Mistakes we might make: providing only the real estate of inclusion and not related support. So that relates to inclusion as a process, right? That are we over, under, around, or through, or are we just bringing kids in and saying, that didn't work? This year more than ever, we can try so many things. After 10 minutes, he can't do it anymore. Okay, he can leave if he needs to, right? We don't have to worry about some of these elements. Oh, I want to protect his dignity. He might have a behavior issue. Well, we can go in and out. We can sign in and out, especially for the kids that are going to be at school with teachers. Some of our more vulnerable kids maybe at school with teachers. We can, with their support, go in and out of these and have students doing, you know, they can be doing some of the things that you may be doing, stretching, pacing even during some of this without it bothering another soul at all. So really thinking about what that looks like right now, especially. We're not experimenting with a range of supports. If you have one child with autism, you know one child with autism. One set of supports will not work for everybody, and that threw me when I got Franklin. Franklin really threw me for months because I kept going back to all the other kids that had profiles like him and wondering why those supports wouldn't work, because he was an individual. Anytime we buy into that those things should work and they're not working, and we've already included a lot of kids like that, and we can't include him, so that must mean that he's the issue, then whenever we look at kids like that, we've taken the I out of IEP, because you know, kids are individuals and they need individual supports. So another you know, issue is that we might think inclusion means that all kids participate, perform, and engage in the same way with the same materials and the same targeted outcomes. I'm going to talk about that later. I think it is one of the biggest barriers to inclusion is that both general ed and special ed teachers don't understand that a 9th grader could be in a social studies classroom and that catching up may not be the target, that kids can have very different looking objectives that relate to the general ed curriculum and standards-based education, but it may be very different than what other kids are doing. And if we're not really clear that the targets may be different, a lot of general ed teachers say inclusion didn't really work. Why not? Oh, he never got close to catching up. You know, he didn't learn this, this, and this. Because as in the words of Pam, our keynote speaker, we didn't tell the right story. We didn't set those kids up for success and say, oh, no, that's what you were looking at. Here are the targets that were appropriate for this student. And he actually was able to learn these particular pieces. And here's some evidence, and here's how we know. And this is why it's critical. And then finally, assuming that inclusion isn't as much of an issue this year, it's more of an issue. It is more, to me, as I said, the fires, the iron's not going to get hotter. This is the time to lean in and give access. This is a year to right a lot of the wrongs. This is the year to go for it. This is not the first time I'm going to say this. The data nationally, especially that statistic I just shared with you from Mary Morningstar, that the data around kids with complex support needs has not changed in 10 years. It is absolutely not okay, especially when we now at this very same time are starting to see over the course of the last 10 years, all of these studies coming out showing how powerful a robust general education experience is for kids with and without disabilities. So we'll get there, but I just wanted to say this is a year to right these wrongs and say, you know, unless a parent tells us I can't do that and a kid is at home all the time and they don't even want to have an experience there at all and sample it and try it, and there's maybe not much you can do in some cases. You can go back to the drawing board. You can try some different ways of working with that family, but certainly for our families that are have been asking for more and are wanting to have these experiences for the kids that are at our schools, we have all kinds of ways of thinking uniquely about design. So before we take a break, I just want to say this is my number 2 recommendation: make your move. That's my plug. This is the second behavior, is make your move. Carla Wade yesterday in introducing the keynote said, let's not waste this crisis. Let's not waste this moment. make your move for two reasons. One is the circumstances are never going to be this unique again, I can't imagine. And number two, what if, as we reimagine schools this year, what if we changed the impression for our culture about what is possible, not only because of UDL, which we'll talk about later today, but will kids people, some of our teachers will start to understand what is possible, what is possible, what is possible, what is possible. This is a time for creativity. Go big in pursuing your goals. My question is, who can't be included? That's the question I would ask in this context. Who can't be included? So I would think about that, and I would ask your teachers, who can't we try some of these new ways of being with? And I would reverse a typical conversation. Instead of saying, where in the day can we include him? I would say, why would he ever have to leave? What would it look like to structure at least to try it, at least getting all of those kids all in? And if we have to make adjustments later, a la how the federal law suggests we should be doing business, we can then go back to those supports and services, and we can look at other placements. But as I understand what is possible right now, why not go all in? We can see collaborative partners that are new. We can see what our neighbors are doing in nonprofits. We can have older students tutor younger students, which would have been a little bit harder to do before. We can have kids support each other through not only social media, Flipgrid, some of these other kinds of technologies, but even in small book clubs. I'm actually working with a high school teacher right now in my community, and we're starting a book club we're opening it to anybody in the high school who wants to come to a book club for kids with and without disabilities. We're just creating it. If it doesn't exist, invent it. What would you need to have this happen? Here are some questions you might ask families. I think this is in the notes, but you could also take a picture here. How would you like your child's instruction to look? And they may need some ideas, right? In other words, tell me what was hard for you. Tell me what you think you could do. What's the most important goal you have for your child this semester? Can you see any ways the current situation could benefit your child? And I would bring them to, as I say, you can bring a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. Some parents and families won't have enough experience to know that they can have a drink, saying, well, what do they mean benefits? Right now, it's just so overwhelming. But if you said, let me give you some examples, I think a lot of families will have many creative suggestions. How could this benefit us? Could we try a new class? He really loves music. I know he doesn't play an instrument, but could he actually is there some way for him to join the band? He just loves marching band. I don't know, let's explore it. What could that look like? Even if he was practicing and he was muted, he was practicing on an instrument, practicing the drum. Let's look at it, right? What's possible in this particular circumstance that we're in? And then do you have the specific ideas on what inclusion could look like for your child? And bring them in as part of this. I'm going to give you some examples of this. This was posted in a group very recently, a Facebook page, and this is how I got the idea for our book club locally. It was a nonprofit that works mostly with kids with disabilities. And so I think it was a parent said, want to get an idea if anybody's interested. I've been thinking about doing a book club for kids with disabilities. I was thinking about starting this book club. We could do audiobooks. And some of them that they actually picked were like Harry Potter. There were even films connected to them. We could do Zooms once a month. And when it's over, we could do it in person. And the first thing I thought about was make it inclusive. And so I did share a comment and then went to my own community and said, let's do something. While I love the energy of this comment, this is a time to create these connections between kids. And, do you think that, as she said, hey, when it's done, we can still do it. So what we create now will have this potential later, right? So if it doesn't exist, create it. Here's a colleague of mine, a mom, her name is Lisa Orbis. She said, my teen wanted to take guitar. During virtual learning, she was asked to practice and submit weekly videos. We wanted more support, so we emailed the teacher, who immediately set up weekly 45-minute sessions. She had never done this before. This was only because of COVID. My husband joined, then the orchestra teacher joined, and then other people were joining. And she said it's everybody's favorite activity, and it was kids with and without disabilities. It was a matter of asking for the support. What are the students' interests? What could we envision? Again, that might have energy after we get through all of this. I want to show you this video. This is Caltash. And it's a really gorgeous example of what it can look like to create something that didn't exist before.
Okay, so let's move in skills within special education teacher at Wish Charter, which is a fully inclusive charter school located in Westchester. And I created this lunch group for my student, Finn, through collaboration with his mom. We really wanted to come up with ways that he could meaningfully connect with his peers. Virtual learning was great. He loved seeing their faces, but it didn't allow for as much back and forth exchange, especially when formal instructions started. So I came up with the idea of having a Zoom lunch call twice a week. These specific students were in Finn's advisory class, which is essentially homeroom. And I would see them every morning, interact with him. So I brought it up to them. I said, hey, are you interested in this? And they were like, oh my God, yes. And then they invited another friend to join. So strategies that I've used during this lunch call, I do a lot of modeling. I downloaded Finn's pod system, the exact system that he uses on his personal device, onto my personal iPad. And so when I'm communicating and when he's communicating, or his peers, I'm modeling that language for him. His mom, she's amazing in regards to AAC. And she kind of taught me, to tell him what page you're going into, even if he's not yet accessing that vocabulary, you're kind of helping him to understand where you got to those different words. And I also want to pause and make sure everyone's hearing Finn when he does participate and communicate, and also to regularly say, hey, is there anything, Finn, you want to add? We're working on him making comments and asking questions, and just increasing his consistent communication with his device, his talker. It feels very natural. Usually I start with how's everyone feeling, just a social emotional check-in, especially given the circumstances of virtual learning. And then I kind of just let it go where I let it go, the conversation go where it's going to go naturally. All right, you guys know what I'm going to ask. Let me go into questions. How is people, everyone?
How is everyone?
Let's go around. I want to hear. Misha, I see you first on my screen. How are you feeling, girl? Let's hear.
I'm feeling really happy and excited that it's Friday. And excited it's Friday.
I forgot it is Friday.
And Misha said she feels happy and
Happy, excited.
shaking the hands. Same.
Finn's ready to share.
Oh, Finn, tell us. Say it again.
Friday.
You're feeling friendly.
I wonder, Finn, if you feel friendly because you're in your group chat with all your friends.
Angie, how are you feeling today?
I'm feeling good, I guess.
Listen, good is
Good.
good.
Yeah.
Is good. So opinion, you're feeling good.
Good.
Awesome. If he doesn't say anything and, I hear something, I'm like, oh, wait, it sounds like Finn was saying something. Finn, can you say it again?
All right, so I'm going to stop it there. But I just wanted you to get an example of what I mean by if it's not there, invent it. And I just wanted to point out something I think is really gorgeous about that example is it's authentic, it's meaningful, it's with kids that he, in this particular case, knows, and it is not 5 students with disabilities and 3 students without disabilities. It is natural proportions, and it's focused around Finn as an individual. And I think where this authentic work and this really personalized kind of approach to inclusion does have barriers, it's a lot of work in planning. Again, in this particular context, this is a fantastic place to start from as a goal, at least as a goal, to say, how can we not only provide these experiences, but make sure that they are experiences that really meet the definition of true, authentic, inclusive education. And so hopefully a couple of those are sparking some ideas for you. I just wanted to make sure that we ended each segment, and not just once or twice, but I want to kind of end each one with this reminder. And that is having you think about these three things. So before we go to break, what's something so far you can use? Maybe you don't have anything yet. Maybe you're waiting for the next segment. Is there anything so far that you can use? You yourself want to utilize one of those pieces of research with your staff, or you really want to think more about personalizing inclusion? Do you have anything yet that you can share? Do you want to share the 20 ways lists or the website even? What resource so far is interesting you? Is there any? And we're going to have more and more resources as we go on. So I just want to say, I can't believe I did it because that was a lot of talking, but I'm going to put this to bed by saying, again, looking at our data, understanding our reality, and this unique opportunity, this is a year to right a lot of wrongs, to really think differently about what placement even is. And I think UDL itself is going to, the sort of underlying piece about how instruction can look really different for different kinds of kids, is going to, we're never going to go back to what things looked like before. We're always going to be open to some of these possibilities. So this is the year to go for it. For that reason, not only because we want to engage in some remedies, but also because a lot of the essential pieces are in place. And clearly from your answers to that survey, that also means the story that, that you are sharing with staff is already pointed towards opportunity. All right, so we're going to go ahead and take our break. I encourage you, I hope some of you can come back, if not all of you. I encourage you to get some water. I encourage you to peek outside if you can, maybe get a little movement. And when we come back, I'm going to show you all of the research, the compelling pieces around why we should not just include kids, but raise our expectations for what's possible. I'll see you in 15 minutes. I'm going to play some little jazz music so you'll know that we're on break when you hear the music. All right, I'm going to get started. We have about a minute left, so just get yourself settled in. I've reposted the notes in the chat, so if you're looking for that PowerPoint, it's there. And welcome back. No online pullouts. See a question, but I'm not sure what that means. We have a smaller group. We could probably, do you want to be unmuted? There's a question, no online pullouts. Not sure what that means.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm suggesting that we don't have self-contained special education units online.
Right.
You're pushing in the students into regular classes with supports using your process thinking.
That's
This
right.
is a push-in model. And you do co-teaching and you try to support in small groups with pre-service teachers or teacher assistants.
Yeah, I think it will probably look different based on elementary, middle or high school,
Yeah.
or the level of need of student for sure. But I think it is absolutely a new way of imagining what this can look like. I mean, in some students, especially with adapted work, we're going to talk about that in the third session of this, especially when we really take a close look at what the expectations are and we let go of everybody having to do everything in the same way. It helps us think about really creative independence and interdependence. Again, depending on needs of kids. But yeah, thank you for clarifying that. And welcome back. Thank you so much. It is nice to hear voices too. It's nice to know that there are other folks here. So that's wonderful. Thank you. And thanks for participating in the chat. I absolutely love it. All right, so we are back. We are first to, just to remind you, if you were not here, you're joining us anew. What we were talking about before we left were the first 2 recommendations of a set of 5. The first was really understanding inclusion as a process: over, under, around, or through, find a way, or make a way. And the second was kind of making your move, not waiting, and not even just using this year as an experiment and saying, oh, we'll learn a lot with UDL, I'll teach the teachers, and then we'll go for, you know, some of these placement changes later. I think there's never been a more you know, opportune moment probably for this. So we talked a little bit about how you might make some of those inroads. And now I want to attach another big idea to that, which is how can we teach up? How can we push up and help our teachers understand that it's not just a matter of placement itself and getting kids to have that kind of access, but it's also about potentially providing more appropriate kinds of challenge and helping kids to dial in to general education curriculum and instruction in some ways that might actually help us understand those learners in a different way and design instruction in a different way. So I want to just show you a video. This is Dan Habib's work. Some of you may know Dan Habib. You may know about him, who's a kind of a superstar in our field. He's made these feature-length films, like including Samuel and Who Cares About Kelsey. He's done some mini films. He's done films for different nonprofit organizations. And this is one of my favorite minis. We're not going to see the whole movie called Tasha. We're going to see a part of the movie. And so this is going to be, you're going to see Tasha from the beginning of the year till about, I don't know, mid-year probably, but it's just a couple of minutes. And I want in particular, you know, the attention to be around the curriculum. I want you to be able to see her curriculum evolve over time and how it impacts her ability to not only be independent and interdependent, but even, as they note, a little bit about her behavior. So let's take a look about how can challenging curriculum drive better supports? How can belonging connection provide opportunities? Be thinking about that.
We knew right off that she was incredibly motivated by music and musical instruments and doing things that way. So we wanted to keep developing like a whole box of tools of things that would keep her engaged, because she also has a very short attention span. So something that would engage her one day wouldn't necessarily the next. We wanted to teach her in a different way so that she wasn't running to the heater and banging on the heater or pulling the plugs out of the computers. So
when I first met Tasha, she would have meltdowns sometimes just if schedules were off or if people were different or she just didn't get her way. Where are we going? Are we going to finish the book? So we wanted to be able to be proactive about constantly trying to try different things to make sure that she is able to express what she wants or needs or feels to the best of her ability.
thin. It was another very thin, easy to pour liquid. How many states of matter are there again? Three. There are 3 states of matter. And what are? When Tasha came to my class last year, she had a very basic, what we called a talk box, so a augmentative communication device. And it had like 5 basic pages of pre-programmed things, and she used it in structured settings that were the same all the time, so we could make calendar one of the pages that worked all the time. But we found that she was wanting to say and was more engaged than that device allowed.
And finally, last May, we were able to purchase, the district did, the Vantage Light for her to use. She's usually able to go through multiple steps to finding different things that she wants to say. You're a snack?
The the team itself went to a lot of trainings on how to support her using it, and she became a lot more involved in the classroom that way, socially and academically. So we were able to make pages that connected to every lesson in the room instead of just the things that happened every day all the time, as well as social pages of asking questions and telling jokes. And we found that once she got that, there were joke pages on it, and during snack time, all of the kids would come over and they'd ask her to tell them a joke. They would ask if they could touch it too.
Can Caitlin try? Yes or no?
Can Caitlin try? Yes or no?
I said yeah.
Since Tashia's had her device, her behaviors have decreased. In the small amount of time that she's had the device, it's also really increased her verbal output. She is saying all kinds of different things. Who is this? Very? I think with this device and from the help of her teachers, she's learning more and more. Go to Mrs. B. Karena mulai ini, with this at home, she speaks sentences that she would never speak before. Yeah. She, when I first started here at recess time and at lunchtime, would just kind of be by herself. But this year, she's really become very socially aware of what's going on in the class and wanting to be with her friends and sit by them and do what they're doing.
I've been out on the playground before for recess duty, and there'll be a student with autism or another disability that will walk by, and there are some kids who, without having those experiences, tend to shy away. But when I look out and I see students from my class out there, they're engaging with everyone, and they will go over and they'll want to play with Tasha.
All right, I'm going to stop it there. I just like that little sequence where you see that she's interacting with her communication, and as you watch the year go by, which is not many more minutes, but you know, the direct and proximal support that she receives fades little by little. So you can even see that their commitment to giving her those moments with friends and giving her moments away from really even during some academic tasks, really directed kind of experiences. The other thing is that I think is helpful about this is time when she's doing her Black Bears. And I think, you know, I not only do they talk about ways she got access to better communication, she did better, but I love that scene of showing what she's actually doing. Because one conversation we don't have enough in kids with complex support needs is how behavior is related to curriculum. And that when students, and I would say kids without disabilities too, but when you've seen kids who are inappropriately challenged and they sort of just give up, like it's not exciting, it's not interesting, it's not novel, and it's not joyful. And so I can't sort of sink my teeth into it. And we see a lot of times with kids when we give them something richer, how they can look very different, not just motivated to learn, but sometimes even motivated to engage with those augmentative communication devices in that particular piece. Yes, I love how the teachers sitting on the floor with students, no big deal, other students moving around. Yeah, absolutely. And this year is going to be even more of that, right? You are going to be able to do things differently without it being, well, I was going to say seen as unusual, without it even being seen if necessary, which is something that I am really, I think we're going to learn a lot from this, is what is possible? How can we think about this? Kids like Tasha and many other kids in our care, I think, help us think about something that one of my mentors, Ann Donnellan, called the least dangerous assumption. And that is, in the criterion of least dangerous assumption, there is, holds that there is less danger to students if teachers assume instructional failure is due to instructional inadequacy rather than student deficits. And what she meant by that was, it's really dangerous for kids with lots of needs if we say, well, you know, he can't do that, or he's really low. Oftentimes we don't know what we don't know for many of these kids like Tasha for sure. And so a more creative, and not just a more hopeful, but a more creative and maybe helpful and potentially richer space to work from is to say, have we not yet found the it? Have we not yet found sort of what it's going to take to get her there? And so in Tasha's case, that might be giving her a better communication system and working within that sophistication. And at first she's, knocking over everything in the library those first few weeks. And then we just little by little, she gets better and better. I just want to give you a little glimpse to the end of the Tasha film because it's really quite beautiful. At the very end of the year, she's even able to show off some of her talents, and one of her favorites is in music. So I'm going to show you a little scene here at the very end that kind of goes to that presuming confidence.
Playing. So you're going to hear some solos on the piano.
All right, I'm going to stop it there. And what I like about, I so agree with Pam this morning. I love story because this is not to suggest every kid will look one way, or that, every student has the same skill set, or that, only kids that show these sort of interesting talents, deserve these kinds of experiences at all. I love, though, the stories that remind us that we often live in that space of having to embrace that least dangerous assumption. Part of presuming competence says this: if this child in front of me is more competent or complex than she appears to be today, what will I wish I had taught her? And I think that is the most important part of leaning into inclusion this year, is to say it's not just because kids should have access, and it's not just because we've never really met the promise of the federal law, but it's also because a lot of kids are surprising us along the way. And I think with universal design, as it continues to emerge, we're going to have so many more of those moments. I love this other little image here that I thought would also be helpful. This is Beth Foraker. She's a colleague that does a lot of work in inclusive schooling, but in faith-based learning. And her son, Patrick, always wanted to go to college. And the family just said, well, okay, Patrick, they weren't a family that for whatever reason said that's not for you. Though because he has Down syndrome, when he was a baby, it's not like everybody, was having that conversation around him. So she posted this a week after we all went into the quarantine. And this is what she said: Patrick's been home since 3/6. Today was his first day back at college via distance learning. So he goes to college now, but not at home, not in his own home community. He had to wake up at 6 a.m. for his normal 9 a.m. class because of the time difference. That didn't stop him. He got his cup of coffee and happily sat down to see his friends. Inclusive college matters. And we're going to look at that in just a minute. But I just think, what if we had said to Patrick, that's not for you? And seeing now, all of his interest and his potential at being able to access this thing. We're going to talk more about college in a second if you've got some questions about that. But one of the things that you'll see in my slides is in a couple of different places, maybe I didn't put it there, but I'm going to go back here. I have put in some pictures. I don't know if any of you caught that. There's a little camera there in the lower corner. And I did that on one of the first slides too. When you see that little camera,
Okay, so let's.
What it means, sorry. The little camera means document. So whether that's my friend's son holding up the Six Flags poster, she's documenting his journey. Beth is documenting Patrick's journey. We can document these lunch groups. We want to document all this great universal design. We want to document these wonderful inclusive inroads. And she wants Patrick's professors to see him sitting down there with that cup of coffee. Hey, some of you probably take Patrick seriously. Some of you don't quite understand how much he cares about your classes, but you should know that he got up at 6 o'clock with his cup of coffee so he could be at college. So I think all of those are helpful. And I think if we can encourage our families and our teachers to say, this is going to be a year where we want to document every single thing. If a parent tells us that they've learned a new reading approach by being home with their child, document it. If you see great work products that are happening as a result of collaboration, get some documentation. If students are in front of the in front of the Zoom call, or they're in front of the Google, Meets, and they're interacting in a certain way, document it, because all of those products are things we're going to be able to use for future planning. Let's now look at a little bit of this research. And before we dive into it, then I want to have us talk a little bit together. I want you to remember the words of my colleague, Norman Kuntz, who is a man with cerebral palsy, born with cerebral palsy. His parents were told to institutionalize him. They did not. And he is now a psychologist, and he does a lot of work in inclusive ed. Maybe some of you know him. He's fantastic. And my favorite Norm Kuntz, inspirational quote is, sometimes being realistic isn't being realistic. Telling, I'm sure Beth was told it's not realistic for Patrick to go to college. And we use this as a frame that may not be very helpful. Going back to the keynote, Pam saying the stories that you tell are critical. Are we telling teachers that this is a great year of opportunity, or that it's a year of fear? I mean, truthfully, we probably have both, but that we can position this and try to get ourselves focused in on all of the potential things that we might try. So sometimes being realistic isn't a good place to hang your hat. It's really thinking about possibility and potential instead. So let's look at just a couple of studies, and then maybe you might think, are some of these studies resources that you want to check out? Is there something here that you might want to share with other people? Or is there anything in here to use? Maybe you want to talk to teachers about teaching up. All right, so this is a study only a few years old now by a research team in New York. This is Syracuse, George Theo Harris, Julie Costin, and Chelsea Bronson. 2016 study. And what they do is they go around. It's not their first round of this study. They've done it more than once. They first did it when George was a principal, but now he is a professor, as are Julie and Chelsea. And what they do is they go into schools where there's a heavy resource model. In other words, kids with disabilities get their services in a different space. And they go in the Syracuse area, and they ask who wants to work with them, and then they start these what they call schools of promise practices, where they engage in professional development around things like what we would now call UDL, and they talk about inclusion and presuming competence and teaching up, and inclusion's a process. I mean, those kinds of things anyway. And they find that in every instance of doing this, that students with disabilities end up doing better, because what they do is they move students with disabilities into general ed classrooms. Before they get into these constellations, before they get into these programs, all the kids with disabilities have to leave and go to all the therapies, and they have to go to special ed classrooms, and they have to go to get all their services. When they're done redesigning, the students stay in their classrooms and the services come to them. And I'll never forget talking to George at one point, and he said, what really inspired me was that I noticed that one of my students, as he was the principal, every time I was in the hallway, he was there too. And he said, I was going to either get this kid a suitcase, or I was going to redesign supports, because no wonder he wasn't learning. He was never in the classroom. He was always leaving. So they redesigned this. So what they do is they bring resources into classrooms. They collaborate, they code, they don't code. There's not a full-time bell-to-bell co-teaching model, but usually one co-teacher, serves 2 or 3 classrooms. There's a paraprofessional assigned to these smaller groupings, and they're assigned more by the need of the pod than around individuals. And so they're really beautifully written. But this particular one, you can see the title there is Inclusive Reform as a Response to High Stakes Pressure. And in other words, what they're saying is, if you're feeling all this pressure, and here's another reason, because we're in this new reality, and you're worried about high test scores, go for inclusion, because inclusion will get you a bigger focus on UDL. It will get you collaboration. It will get you co-planning. It'll get you access to therapists. So they used all that richness. And if one student needs more movement, let's let's bring that to everybody. If some kids need smaller group learning for mathematics, let's do station teaching Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday in here. If somebody's going to need visuals, let's make that a choice for everybody. And so what they found is in their this first data set here on the left, and you know what? I just realized I've cut off that's literacy scores. So we've got literacy and math. Is you have students in 5th grade, all students before 55% at or above grade level. And then 2 years later, you've got 66%. And if you look at students with disabilities, it's very severe. It's more than double, 18 to 43%. Look at the 8th graders. They move from 48% to 62% and 8% to 40%. It's severe. It's a lot. And then you look at the math, and we have the Cedric scores, and you have 50 to 58%. Yeah, I think it's really incredible too. It's small. It's a school. You know, we're not talking. I'm going to show you some statewide data in just a second, though. Look at the 4th graders, 20 to 42%. And so, and what I like about this, when you're talking about middle school, and because they were bringing all kids in, some of these kids have very significant disabilities. They have very, very complex needs. So this is not just kind of, you know, bringing in a few kids that we think might make it. This is a new way of envisioning what schools can look at. So definitely what I would say is if you're looking for something to share, this is available in a full PDF online. Maybe this is one of your shares. Maybe this is a resource that you want. So in other words, pluck something here that's actionable for you. All right, let's look over here at my favorite study. This is Jenny Kurth, who we looked at earlier with her autism study. She does some of the best work in the field. And what Jenny looked at was, she looked at 2 groups of kids on the autism spectrum. She looked at kids who were included for most of their, most of their careers, and then kids who weren't. And so she's looking at kids, she's tracking them through elementary, and I shouldn't say she's tracking them. She has data from elementary, but she's actually administering an assessment when they're in middle school. It's not a longitudinal study. And this one is even tinier. I am not suggesting that you can make great big claims from a study with only 25 kids, but it's a great jumping off point because this one helps us think about a different question altogether. And that is, what about kids who are really low? So here's what Jenny found. These kids went, I said most of the kids were that were in the the white band were included, you know, maybe not 100% all the way through, but for the most part were included. And then kids in the gray band, for the most part, weren't. They might have pushed into gym, music, art, you know, a few things, but for the most part. And she controlled for a ton of things. She controlled for the label of autism versus Asperger's syndrome, which was a thing at the time. She controlled for adaptive behavior scores, things like that. And IQ digits. And what she found is, again, small n, is that students who were included did better, and they did much better. And here's what's important about this, I think, for our teams, is it's really important for teachers to understand that the kids in the white band are not at grade level. They're not even close to being at grade level. These are kids with still fairly complex needs. So even for kids that aren't catching up in this year and have maybe different targets and don't look like their other 7th grade peers, which model is more is recommended, is more useful, is more responsive? This study, very small number, I think is very clear. And if you don't like the ones with the tinier numbers, you can take a look at this newer study from a researcher in Indiana named Sandy Cole. I don't mean to rush you through these. It's just that I could go through, hundreds of pieces of research, and I just share them because the writing is on the wall, and I'm just basically saying, take my word for it. We could go on and on, you know. But this is one I would get. I would get this one for your team. So Sandy Cole, and this just came out. It just came out in 2020. This is her press release, though, and I like her little description in it. So she said she looked at, because she's at the Indiana University, she was able to get statewide data, and they looked at kids in elementary school, and they found each student with a disability a developmental twin. So basically, they looked at kids with the same test scores, and they said, okay, on the state tests, these 2 kids had the same labels, perceived needs, and test scores at this level. Now, let's see how they look. And so as they looked at them later in subsequent secondary school, they were able to look at kids who had this developmental twin and compare them. They looked at the kids who had high inclusion and then low inclusion. So kind of like Jenny Kerr. And what they found is students with disabilities who spent 80% or more of their time in inclusion did significantly better in reading and math than those who spent more time in separate special education classrooms. It's a big data set. And so I think putting some of these studies together, for those of you that have the teachers or the fellow administrators that want to see the numbers, the other thing I will say about this is I don't think any of this is easy. Just showing the data doesn't mean that, oh, just, bring kids in, give them the space. From the first segment that, it has to be about over, under, around, or through, that these studies, the first two anyway, are really about thinking about those scaffolds very carefully. But what I do like about this Sandy Cole study is that we don't know about the quality of inclusion. It's too big of a study. Some of the high inclusion might have been not very universally designed at all. And still, she got these pretty fantastic looking numbers. So some of you may need that data. And so if that's going to be helpful to you, keep that in mind. Maybe that's something that you want to share with folks. Think about what it means to pair inclusion as a process, over, under, around, or through, and then take that and pair it with this. Pair it with presuming competence. What if we could help our teams understand we're not just doing this because kids have a right to it or even because of the public law, but it's also because kids have been so, I don't know what, there's several words I could use. How could I be gentle? We have really never understood the potential of people with disabilities in the last 5 years last 5 subsequent decades. If we know anything, especially about kids with perceived cognitive disabilities, is we've never had high enough expectations. This could be the year where, because we sort of go all in, we start to see not only what's possible with these connections, but what's possible as the curriculum and instruction changes this year. So I want to show you one more video, and then I would like to do some breakouts for some discussion around this. So I want you to take that picture there, and I want you to think about what are the implications of the data as we think about, what's possible, and we're thinking about things like least dangerous assumption, and then we pair that with having a vision. And when I talk to families, one of the things I talk a lot about is, what is your vision? Like when you go into your meetings, are you just saying like, what the placement's going to be, or are you talking about what your hopes and dreams are? And so one of the things that a lot of families are talking about is whether, I don't know if my child's going to want to pursue this, but I want the idea of college to be open. And if that is true, then we're going to have conversations that are very different, even from the age of 6 and 7 and 8 years old. So let's take a look at this organization. Now, if you don't know, do any of you already know about Think College or use them as a resource? You can just type in the comments if that's something that you're using. If it's not, I would implore you to please go to Think College and please share some of their videos or some of their resources. And by the way, it would also fall into something you could share and something you could, a resource and something you could use. Yeah, I think you're really going to love this. This organization started several years ago, and it's just grown in leaps and bounds. And what they do is they help all kinds of universities and colleges, community colleges, you name it. They help them become equipped to invite students with intellectual disabilities on campus. And so, and they offer all kinds of supports. So let's take a look at just this little teaser film from Think College. And then I just want you to think about positioning this as a potential goal for kids. And then as you think about that data. You know what? I don't know. I think I took it out. We're gonna split. I'm gonna do the discussion first, and then I can grab it. So that way I know for sure that I can get exactly what I need in queued. Let me show you one more thing before we go into our discussion. So what we're gonna do, I'll just show this at the end, is we're gonna go into discussions of about 4 people, and here's what I wanna talk about. And then you can have the video to look forward to. We're gonna look forward to that as we brainstorm some of the practices that we can now leave behind. We're going to leave behind, 2020 has been a heck of a year. And I'd like to litter a little bit. I'd like to litter in 2020 and leave some of these things behind. Things like starting in segregation. What we have for a lot of students, especially young children, is we have kids with really complex needs. And I think it's quite common across the country is that kids will come in and we'll automatically look at them and say, oh, we have a program for kids like that. So when you read the federal law, when I read it, it talks about kids get access to LRE, they get access to general ed classrooms. We provide this set of supports and services, you know, this sort of litany of things. And then that's dynamic. So we have to go back and revision that. And then and only then, when we find that we can't, you know, create that in our process, then students may get a different placement. Yet, we have so many students going to programs almost immediately from day one. And, you know, in the law, we call that, that challenge is the principle of portability. If we can provide the services that that program has in general ed, and oftentimes I would argue we can, then kids shouldn't be leaving and going elsewhere. So starting in segregation is a big one for me. The other one is really questioning the idea that, you know, assuming that the more need a child has, the less likely it is that we can probably include them. Not true at all. And some kids with the most complex needs are included for the entire school day. So the idea that we've sort of misconstrued what the continuum looks like is a big concern, and that we think about high needs meaning high segregation in some ways, manifests itself in different ways, but assuming that inclusion's for younger students. So, you know, that we can do this when kids are young, but what about the gap? The gap gets wider. Do y'all know what I mean when I talk about the gap? You know, by 3rd grade and 4th grade, kids look different. Do you understand? Does that ring a bell with you? I'm going to go back to Jenny Kerr's study for this one because it's helpful when we talk about the gap and we say, oh, 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th, the gap's getting so big. It was easy when they were in kindergarten. It was easy when they were in 1st grade, but now the gap. That is a complete misunderstanding of the federal law. That assumes that because this child doesn't look like this child, like Tasha doesn't look like those other kids, and no longer is it easy to help her do exactly what they're doing, then inclusion's no longer appropriate for her. It's not true at all. Kids may have very different, very personalized, very unique looking goals from their peers. It does not mean they're not candidates. So that understanding of the gap shows a misunderstanding of the federal law. And here's another way to look at it. I always say, if you want a gap that keeps you up at night, Jen Kurth has provided one for us. The gap between kids with disabilities and kids without disabilities who are included and not included, that massive gap that you see in her study, that's when we should worry a lot about. So that's, you know, another one that we can leave behind is when our staff members, when our teachers are talking about, I'm worried about the gap, be sure that you're revisioning that for them, helping them understand what that could look like. And a more significant presentation of a disability does not mean that your candidacy will look different. Your candidacy for inclusive education should look different. All right, so here's what I want to do. I want to go into these groups, these smaller groups. And what I want us to do, we're going to take about, let me see how much time we have. I don't have a ton of time here, but let's take about 8 minutes, and that should give everybody at least 2 minutes. And I know that this morning section is a lot more preachy than the afternoon section, so I always like to just say, let's make sense of it together. So what I want you to do is talk about what is actionable. What is actionable? What I mean by that is taking this all in. And I saw there was already some great comments there. What could you do differently so far? So maybe you got some ideas. I thought there was great ideas about using our staff differently, really going back and questioning maybe what we're doing for kids with complex support needs. How are we gonna, if those of you that are going to go remote, but you're gonna have some kids at school, can we create, you know, how personalized can we make those programs, and can we be tapping into and signing into those virtual classrooms, and how? Could you come back with some PD for your staff? So it could be anything. And because it's only about 8 minutes and we're having about groups of 4, maybe you could have a timekeeper for the group. And when you get there, and then everybody take about 2 minutes to say one thing that's actionable, what's something you can do. And then when we get back, if you could type some of those ideas in the chat, that would be magical. Okay, so I think Chris is ready to do that. Go ahead and do your thing, and I'll see you in a few minutes. So as you're coming back in, I was just saying, think about, if at least one person, and it can be multiple people, but can you just type some things in the comments as you're thinking about how do we take steps now? How do we take steps thinking about that? Yeah, if one kid needs it, let's offer it to everyone. And I think that's going to be, you're going to see that a lot with UDL. We're going to start to understand how kids can thrive with some of these supports. I have a colleague who used to say kids with disabilities are like disclosing tablets. And a disclosing tablet is the thing that you take at, little kids take at the dentist, where it turns your mouth purple. You say, did you brush your teeth? And they say, yeah. And then they take the pill and their whole mouth turns purple. It's like kids with disabilities are sort of like disclosing tablets. Other kids may not always be, successful in a really didactic or traditional looking kind of, instructional moment, but we might think that we're reaching those kids, but then we bring a child with disabilities in and we realize actually we would do better with this wider range of supports. Everybody may do better. Maybe we weren't brushing as thoroughly as we thought, right? Yeah, thinking about that, the cohorts stay together in the hybrid model. So let kids using some of those, I like using some of our teams to help kids through some of this instruction and help them get some access. Let's see. Thinking about, creating cohorts will cause inclusion for students who are often pulled out. Yeah, I think we need to really think about not only how can we help kids that have had these experiences and we don't want them to lose them, but we also want to be thinking about how do we give kids access who haven't had it before. What a great time to problem solve through this, right? So any ideas that you have, something that you put out there might help somebody else. So even if it's a small thing, like sharing a particular piece of research or is there a mini PD from this that you could do back at school? What are you thinking about? Purposeful supports, I love that. Yeah, how kids access UDL lessons, absolutely. I think so too. I think some kids are really enchanted by some of the new things that we're offering, kids with and without disabilities. All right, let me play this, and you can keep sharing in the chat. You can keep doing that. But I found, I want to show, I thought instead of grabbing my video, I'm going to show you where this is. This is Pacers, the Pacer Center's website. And that way, if you want to go and get it as your resource or as something to use, you can go and get it and play it for your school. So this is the teaser. They have quite a few little videos, but this is the teaser. And it just talks about who should go to college. So pair this with that research. You can type in the comments what's coming to mind.
Can you tell me about your college experience?
Sure. I came from a really small town. I loved it a lot. Really taught me a lot about life and life skills. Helped me come out of my shell.
College was great. It set me on the path that I'm on today. It took me to Peace Corps, and now it took me to a new job.
Oh, college was great. I owe my career to it. I even met my wife there.
Who do you think should go to college?
I think everyone should go to college.
I think everybody should go to college.
Anybody that wants to.
What about people with intellectual disabilities?
What?
That's a big question.
I've never really thought about that.
I have pretty high expectations for myself, and then there's always the expectations of the professors, and it's the blend between the two that is most important. I've always found a way to do well or do my best in all of my courses, no matter what.
I do know that she belongs in this classroom because she has a lot to offer, and she thinks about the works that we're discussing, and the class accepts her on that level completely.
The people in school see, oh, she has a disability, don't talk to her, she's so different from everybody else. But here, they accept you as who you are, and they say, you're a college student, you're a human being, the same thing here. I think there's so many ways how kids can look at so many challenges, so many things. There's so many ways how people can change.
The University of North Florida is a great experience for people to relate to college. And they did not ask me if I wanted to go to college. I chose to go to college because I thought that that would be a better path in life for me. It's freedom, basically.
The dream is me going to college and being like a graphic designer or somebody doing art. Art is like my passion.
All my family pretty much went to college, and I said, why not me? Even though I have a disability, I can still go. I can go anywhere I want to go.
We're helping these particular students become more productive citizens and more well-rounded citizens of our country. I think it's just really important. We don't have throwaway people.
It's really enriched the people on this campus, and it's just made it a much nicer place to work. It just amazes me how well it's gone.
So I'm just going to stop it there. It's a little bit longer, and they have some other films that you might find interesting. But check that out. You can go to Pacer Center. I put it in the comments. Think College Teaser, but they've got other videos related to this experience. And I think it's helpful not only for our families who are doing some visioning and trying to think big and trying to be audacious with their, considering possibilities for their child, but I also think it helps folks understand things like least dangerous assumption a little bit better and start to understand, what would our planning and what would our practices look like if we considered that, this student may be more complex than he or she appears to be right now today. So, hopefully you're starting to kind of be able to tie those components together of the process piece and then this higher expectation piece. One of the things, and feel free to borrow it if you like, but one of the things that I, often use in my own teaching, or if I'm giving a workshop, is I'll say, hand up in the air, and I'll say, raise your hand if you have high expectations for children or for all students. And then, everybody raises their hand, right? Nobody would say, I have medium expectations for children. And so then I show that research, and I show the Think College, or I'll share other artifacts or other examples and stories with them. And I'll especially focus in on what we have learned about inclusion in the last 25 years. And I make a plea at this point in the discussion, and I say, if your hand is up and you're saying that you have high expectations for students with disabilities, then you have to understand that needs to be linked to being an advocate for inclusive practices. You can't have one without the other based on what we know now. So that might be another, point that some of you may find useful or something that you want to use. All right, I don't want to give away too much of what we're doing next, but our UDL is going to be part of our afternoon. So before we kind of wrap up here for the morning, I just want to make sure I'm leaving a little bit of space and time for any questions that I didn't get to from the chat. And then I'll give you kind of a little preview of what the afternoon's going to look like more specifically. We can even unmute people. It's a small enough group to do so, certainly. Or if you just rather do it in the chat, that's okay too. As my colleague Patrick says, questions, comments, or snide remarks, all will be welcome. Anything that you have to share? Yeah, you're welcome, Terry. And we're going to do a little bit more at the end, because this is a big thing. And so if we don't take steps to say, well, what would I do tomorrow with this? It's necessary for sure. Anything else? Any other questions?
So Paula, if I may, sorry, I'm a little hesitant about verbally expressing myself in this kind of venue.
Yeah, no, I know. Please join me. I know it's kind of overwhelming, but yeah, it's a small group though too.
I am more of a verbal processor, and every time I start typing the chat, I have to I'm finding myself not able to keep up with what's going on in my brain. And I have to tell you right now, I'm just reflectively processing so much, not because I didn't already understand or know all of these things, but every time I have heard you speak, or every time I hear groups of people like-minded with me come together in this, it just, my heart starts to go in directions that are so wonderful. And so I apologize if I don't have anything necessarily that I'm putting into the chat, but I'm kind of thinking about case management versus co-teaching. I'm thinking about all of this kind of like reform from even semantics, such as saying things like push in, pull out, to let's call it what it is, which is we're being segregating. We're going to pull out and segregate the kids, or we're going to do something more positive, and instead of calling it a push in, call it an in-class support. Because even the term push in indicates to me something that I'm doing to a kid or something like that, instead of saying, no, that kid's going to be in the class. And so anyway, I'm kind of reeling a little bit, which is good, but
Yeah.
Thank you for the opportunity to have the chance to reflect like this.
Well, thank you, because I said, you do feel kind of like yourself out here. So I love hearing that. And I'm glad. I think that's a really good place to be in, is really thinking about some of the steps. And I keep thinking to myself, the reason this is so, this really is, I don't know if I want to use the word urgent, but I love that we're getting to talk about this in early August, because it's, for some of our careers, there literally has never been a better time. And again, I'll say it again and again, but, and feel free to borrow this for your staff members and your teachers, but the iron won't get hotter. It won't get hotter when it comes to onboarding people with UDL. It's not going to get hotter when it comes to trying out some things with inclusive education, because think about all those barriers that are in place. He might have a meltdown. I don't think he can stay for that long a period of time. A lot of what we have to do, he has to do his own thing for a piece of it. All of those things. Again, there are some stipulations about how much support we have and if families are involved, but in general, there's some of those barriers will at least look very different. And I think it's, exploiting them, I don't know how else to say it, will be critical. So from day one, maybe asking our teachers to really think about that bigger vision and saying, what would this year look like if we just leaned in as far as possible and let them come up with some of the practices that you were all coming up with, these great ideas, what would look like, if we let teachers do some of that dreaming as well. Yeah, so Terry said, oh, maybe, can you have more people in the breakout? Yes, we have a smaller group here. So when we do the afternoon one, if we have the same numbers, we'll just make them a little bit bigger. Great idea. And I'm sorry, I'm having a little Zoom struggle here, but so if I didn't get to some of your comments, sorry about that. I think I got most of them, but good comment. The other thing I want to tell you, so I want to make sure I get you out on time here, is please, hopefully I'll get some of you, if not all of you, to join in the afternoon. I'd love to have you. Little preview for you. When you come back in the afternoon, it's a little bit more of a whimsical approach. So we are going to be showing off lots of supports that you can use, not only in online learning with your students, but things that you can use with your teachers to inspire them to do something different. I'm going to give you some ideas about what PD could look like. And I'm going to talk a little bit, if not a lot, about how to keep feeding them all this good UDL stuff this year, because you're never going to have a more interested audience, captive audience in a sense, who's going to want to know about how technologies and a range of supports can help all kids. So that's what we're going to do in hour number 3. And the other thing is, I am going to give away some books. We have a very small group, and I have quite a few books that I can give away. This book is going into its next edition. So for those of you that come back and you're interested in this, we'll have several books that we can give away. So don't let me forget about that. Just as our way out, I like to model for a lot of the teachers I'm working with some different techniques that they can use. So one of them is just called a whip, where I ask people to go around and just share in a single word something. And so you can do this with folks sharing, opening up your unmuting them in video. But because our group is, we would have different levels of comfort in doing that, and we want to make sure we get out in time, I'm going to have us use the chat. So could you, again, anybody that's available to do so, I know some of you are not, but if you're available to do so, can we just whip around the room and just have everybody kind of as our exit slip in 1 to 2 words, please share something that you're taking away so far. It could be just the word inclusion. If you want to do 3 words, I'll allow it. But if we could just kind of do a whip and just say, here's what we've got so far, and here's what we can build on when we come back and talk about UDL. Okay, great. Jennifer says flexibility. Love it. I'm also hoping that those of you that have a lot to say, it's like, okay, I only have to do a little bit. Yeah, have faith. Process. Thank you for saying process. Yes, over, under, around, or through. Elastic. Hope. Yeah, and please use it. Absolutely. We want you to think about what's something you can use, something you can share, and a resource today. Thank you, James. Inclusion is for everyone. Even though historically, if we were to believe Mary Morningstar's newest research, there's a lot of kids that aren't making their way in. We do know it is for everybody. The word it, oh, Lisa, that's such a good one. Consider your language, and that was good from our last comment too. Necessary and critical, community. Thank you, Tim. That's great, because especially when we get to the 3rd segment and we talk about universal design and all that that can bring, you bet that community, equity, and inclusion, belonging, all of those are at the center. All right, I want you to get a great lunch. So go ahead, take your nice hour lunch break. At least try to get outside in some water if you don't get a lunch in. And if you can, I'd love to have you back in 1 hour. I will hopefully see you then. All right, well, welcome back. And thank you. It's so nice to have our group back here, or maybe it's new people, but about our same size. This is a fairly jam-packed hour. So I don't think I will do the breakouts in this hour, but I'm going to do it right away in the last hour. And the last hour is really kind of putting it together and thinking about how we connect this all to self-determination, and what we're going to do with the content. So if you can bear with me, this one is just, it's just a lot. There's just a lot going on with this one. So I hope to be able to share a lot of ideas with you. But the first thing I'm going to do in the way of modeling is we are going to start off right away with a little brain break. And I'm going to talk about why I'm doing that in a second. I can't see most of you, so that's okay. You can participate in whatever way makes you feel comfortable. But I'm going to do something with you called Countdown, and it just involves 5 different motions. We're going to assign 1 motion to each number, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And we're just going to kind of share in those those activities. So I'm going to start with 5, and we're going to do 5. Let's do 5. We'll do jumping jacks, and we'll kind of do them seated. So we'll do 5. It's 1, 2, 3. You can stand up. 4 and 5. And then I'm going to do 4 arm circles. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then I'm going to do 3 stretches, and I kind of call these, I used to just call these like, stretches, or, I'd have just students, just do a little bit of a, kind of organic movement, whatever they wanted to do. And I had a teacher of young children say, well, we call those superhero salutes because you make them look like Superman. So 1, 2, 3, or you can do your own fun organic movements. And then 2, let's do just 2 kind of stretches. So I'm going to do 1, kind of almost a hug with 1 arm on top. I'm going to do a hug with the other arm on top. So that's 2. And then 1 for the grown-ups is a little sip of coffee. Or you can have the whole cup if you want. Okay. So we are back. And the reason I started with that is because I really believe in practicing what we preach, right? So if we want our teams to kind of get all into this work, then we have to be into the work too. So idea number 4 for this hour, as I promised, is going to be all about UDL. And kind of what I keep saying is kind of going all in, going for it with UDL, because we're never going to have an audience that's more interested, I think, than we will this year. So one of the things that I love to talk about is how to use universal design, not just to promote academic learning and raising those expectations for students, but also what if our teachers get really interested in UDL, but they're not using it to open their doors wider? And of course, by that, I mean that as a metaphor, but if we are just designing more and more dazzling lessons over time, but it's not giving access to kids to all kids, or a wider range of kids, then we're not sort of fulfilling the promise. I think either of the federal law, or I think some of the goals of this particular workshop for sure. We want folks to learn to remove barriers, but not just to create better lessons for most of the kids. We want them to really think about, how does the way I'm teaching help a wider range of kids get into these experiences? So I had this little jiffy where you have this not so elegant design where it looks as if there's an opening here for vehicles. Seemed elegant enough, I'm sure, when they built it, but it looks as if a lot of folks get the visual too late, that it's not going to be open for them. So that's what we don't want. We want to make sure that we get around those barriers, or better yet, we keep those posts down so everybody can get through where they need to get. So just a reminder, as we kick this off, I am having a tiny little tech issue with the chat. So if you are trying to get my attention, I will get over there eventually. I just can't seem to multitask it at the moment. I'm going to try to do a workaround in a second. But feel free to put your messages in there. I'd love to hear from you, especially as we go through this hour, because I'm going to pick some names for the book. Remember, if you weren't here this morning, I'm going into a second edition of this book very, very soon. So I want to get rid of these. I might as well get them into the hands of, if you could even tear them up and wallpaper the staff room if you need to. But maybe just as a, better to have them go into some hands that may be able to use them this year. So I'm going to give away a bunch of these. So just type your comments in the box, and we'll just draw some names as we go throughout this time. Again, if you're just joining us, remember, we're looking for at least one idea, something we can use. One idea to share, at least, maybe more, and maybe a resource or two that you can take with you. All right. Without further ado, I'm going to be throwing a ton of ideas at you in this segment. It's going to be rapid fire. So hopefully that's cause for applause and not panic. So stay with me. Let me know what you like or what you need. And we are going to dive right in and talk about universal design for learning. Okay, so this is my visual. This is how I used to walk around my schools. I used to teach high school. I taught both. I taught high school, and I taught I actually taught everything except for fourth grade for a little while. And so I would wear this little fanny pack, especially in the high school. And I would just, this is before we had the tools. Newer teachers have no idea what we went through, right? So I'd wear this, and there's my UDL right in my pocket. I've got index cards. I have squishies. I have highlighters. I have Post-its. I have a Spanish-English dictionary. And I would literally run from space to space. Like I'd look in the one classroom, oh my gosh, that kid's really struggling, and I would throw him a koosh ball and hope for the best, and slam the door and go to the next space. Oh my gosh, they're giving a test I didn't expect, and I got to, on the spot, I got to adapt this, and so I'd add the word bank, or I'd translate something, or I'd make this question into a matching versus fill in the blank. I mean, you've all been there, I know that. And I'd throw it back at the kid, hope that works, and I'd just be running around the school in a frenzy. I don't think it was terribly effective for kids with disabilities, but it was something. That retrofit was better than nothing, I suppose, right? And then what really impacted my work was I had a student, who was kind of looking at me, a student without a disability, and I'm throwing stuff out of the bag and everything, and he's looking at me like, do you have anything in that bag for us? He wants something too. And I'm like, the way I'm designing lessons isn't inspiring these kids. It's not inspiring, I should say, the teacher to do anything different than what's being done. I'm not being a good collaborative partner. I'm patching things in, but I'm not being a partner in design. And that really drove my interest in doing this, is thinking about how can we create those, I don't know, entry points so that we create better experiences for kids with and without disabilities. How do we make them say, wow? I think we're going to all need these little emojis on a stick, right? But there's a reason I'm doing this, because I do think that, you know, those of us that are doing, you know, helping support our teams, we need to be the models. We need to be the ones that are showing that we're willing to try these engagement strategies, and that we'll practice what we preach, and that we'll do the brain breaks, all that good stuff. So if you, you know, believe what I believe, which I'm sure that, you know, this is probably near and dear to you, you probably have your whole, you know, a whole host of strategies for meeting these needs for teachers. But I just want to give you some of the tricks and tips that I use. I usually start off, a lot of our teachers don't understand the history of universal design, and why would they? They're busy, they have other things happening to try to actually use these structures. But I do think that the history is a little bit helpful, because we can look at architecture, where universal design sort of grew from, and we can see that this is really helpful to think about, why are we using this terminology in particular? And of course, the answer is, really, it's the 30th anniversary of the ADA this year, and that's actually a good place to start. When you know, public places, and schools being one of them, had to start looking at different designs, in part because of the ADA, all of a sudden there was this rush to, you know, adopt a different way of being. So you started seeing accessibility, new design everywhere. And that idea of universal design, making something pretty but also functional, over time made its way into education. Started with architects, but it's made its way over. And I always use an architecture example so that they can sort of envision that and have metaphors, which I do like metaphors. So this is in Chicago, where I live, and you see like these old bungalows. None of them are accessible. We've got thousands of them. So now everybody's trying to retrofit. Everybody's tacking something on the front of the house so that their elders can live in those houses and they don't have to move. And it's, of course, you know, we see them dormered and adapted, and people that have 3, you know, little kids are trying to have these, you know, mega strollers, and it just doesn't work for a home that's not universally designed. So when we design universally, everybody benefits. And that's what some of you were saying in the comments. I don't know if it was Stacy or Jennifer, somebody said, you know, I like it when we like that everybody could benefit. You know, in a universally designed home, for example, there are no barriers. Even though it looks like those stairs are a barrier, they're not, because behind that flower bed, there's an accessible entrance, a ramp. And of course, you know, there's wider door frames inside the house. There's motion detected lighting. And when people hear about universally designed residences and public buildings, they think, oh, that's what I want. You know, we want that too. And we know how powerful it is to have this technology work for all of us. So this is just an article from a few years back about how, yes, what we do for some is so powerful for all, right? That tech for the disabled is going mainstream. Well, it is. And the other thing that's kind of cool about this is that the way that this is evolving in our schools right now is that I think it started with things that were lower tech, but now everybody's seeing how some of these other higher tech things, you know, can be really exciting, because we have, you know, now I can reach my kids and I couldn't reach my students before. So I think that's really great. And I just wanted to share with you a couple of examples in case you want to take this approach with your teachers in doing your mini PDs and things. I usually show, you know, kind of some of the examples of what good quality universal design looks like. And I'll just give the example of, you know, environments and how we all use these things. I mean, some of you, I'm 50, so some of you remember when you first saw the predictive software, you know, when Co-Writer was newer, and it's like, you know, now we all have that predictive text in our pockets. We use it to text people. You know, we couldn't live without it now. But when I first saw that, I was like, this is going to be so great for kids with learning disabilities, right? And we now see how critical it is. Things like Alexa. I want to whisper that. Sorry if I just made yours go off. But that was seen as something initially, personal assistants, which is the generic name. Those were used for people who had physical disabilities, who were deaf and blind, and that they could control and manipulate their environment. Now, I can't even turn my lights off without it. And it is for people with fatigue, for people that are elderly. I mean, there's so many people that profit from these tools. So starting and getting folks to brainstorm, what does UDL look like in your own life? That can be really helpful. And so I'll often, you know, have that kind of conversation, and we'll just start talking from there. And here's just some examples as we talked before the break about the things that have made their way into classrooms. So this is a student I worked with years ago where he didn't want to use his accommodations, and we've all had kids like that, didn't want those accommodations. And so we had him work. We had Amy, our speech path, come into the classroom, and she would set up a station, and any student could come to that station and learn about new technology. So he really needed to use speech to text, like Dragon Naturally Speaking. But so she just taught it to everybody, and she said, this is great for dialogue because you can kind of like pretend to have a fight with somebody, or you can kind of riff with somebody, and you can get this great piece of dialogue. And it introduced students creatively to different ways that they could punch up their writing by speaking to write. It's one tool. And one of the cool things about universal design, where I think it's different qualitatively from differentiation and personalized instruction and curricular adaptations, is that it has that bent to it. We're not just after kids getting access. We are after kids becoming expert learners, and for them getting better and better at saying, that tool will work for that, but I think I should use that tool for that. They are learning to learn. And in this day and age, when you can find out anything on the internet, we need a lot of their education focused on that. So anyway, so I think that was a great example. And of course, he became less reluctant because a lot of kids were using some of these tools. Flexible seating. I mean, when I started my career, again, I'm 50. When I started my career, it was like nobody was using flexible seating. If you went and saw it, it was for kids with disabilities. And now it would be odd to go into a classroom, especially in elementary, and not see it. How about things like zones of regulation? I mean, the whole theme today is SEL, and a lot of what people are talking about is for everybody, right? I was just in a classroom in January, and this social worker was doing SEL or zones of regulation for the class. When I started teaching, that kind of thing was done for kids with autism. It was not a thing for everybody. So I think that's a really great, development in our field. And what I want to do is talk about how we can use that springboard and not only get our general ed teachers engaged and excited, but help our special education teachers to see what are some of the kind of neat things about this that they might not already know about, and help them to kind of feel like they can be resources maybe for some of their colleagues. So I'm going to take you through each one of these different pieces of the model, and I'm going to talk about some things that I think would be great to use in 3 different ways. So you might want to write this part down. There are 3 things that I think are powerful, and the reason I'm presenting it here. I think the reason we have to lean into UDL as part of this inclusion conversation is, I mean, it's obvious, I think, in what we're saying here, but I think there's 3 major ways we can do that. And I want to highlight them as we go through. The first is modeling. So I'm going to try to model this as we go. You haven't seen the last of my funny little props or my little interactions or using video or visuals or interacting. So I'm going to try to do that, right? So I think modeling and showing off during our meetings what this can look like. So for example, one of the things I do a lot is I'll remind people to drink water. Believe it or not, this is part of UDL. Wellness is part of UDL, getting people, prepared to learn. So you could say during your meetings, it's like, hey, I really want you guys to be able to stay with me from 3 to 4. Let's drink our water together. And that, is a good model because they can model that for students. Students need healthy snacks. They need healthy food. They need to stretch, right? So number 1 is model it. Number 2 is professional development. And I don't even necessarily mean, full day like you're doing here, but, in any way that you can do it all year long, whether that's brown bag lunches with small strategies, but that we just we're never going to have a more rapt audience interested in this. So just keep, pouring in this as a primary goal for the year for your professional development plan is put everything in the context of UDL, because everything fits in the context of UDL. And the third is collaborate. And I'm going to, talk about that a little bit at the end, but think about like how teachers can help each other, whether that means having some experts on hand that have ways of doing PD with you and for you, whether that's everybody showing off strategies during meetings. Think about having Flipgrid, and instead of using it as I say use it as a talent show, Flipgrid talent show, where every one of your teachers shows off one thing that they're doing in virtual learning that's working for them. And you could even change the themes. What's one Zoom feature you like, or whatever you're using? What's one way that you're connecting with families? And let teachers teach each other. So I'm going to repeat those three. Number one, you're going to model. Number two, you're going to get some PD in there all the way through the year, not just front loaded. And three, you're going to help teachers to teach each other. And you can use the same metaphor about that iron is not getting hotter. Okay, so we're going to talk about how UDL can help us get through the year and then change how we do business in the future. So I'm going to start with action and expression. And as I talk through these, I just want you to think about what kind of knowledge your teachers have right now and how we can sort of maybe up the level of skill and competency and even vocabulary to help them get to the next step. So if this isn't something that you're already super familiar with, you know, let me just kind of go back and say that there are these three principles in UDL, right? There's engagement, representation, and action and expression. So action and expression would be, you know, essentially, I'm really simplifying it, but it's what kids do. So how do kids show us what they know? How do they interact in the world and in the environment? How do they, you know, what choices are we providing? How do they make sense of what they're learning and demonstrate that? So that's all in action and expression. So I'm going to show you some examples, and I want you to think about what parts of this do your teachers have and what parts do they need. So I often start out by just showing them, you know, one way that they already do this, and so many of them do, is they do a good job at giving kids choices. You know, do you want to create a Animoto? Do you want to make a poster? Do you want to create this Glogster? And so it's a really lovely time for teachers to give those choices, and at the same time, they're going to give kids opportunities to be expanding, you know, spreading their wings and learning some of these new skills. And that's what we want. We want kids to become experts at learning and at, you know, using these tools. So let's take a look at this ad. A lot of you may remember this. It's a few years old. And just think about, how is this an example of action and expression?
You gotta see this! Oh, it's gonna do it! Come on, come on! He's gonna do it! Hi, friends.
So you'll remember that ad that was a couple Christmases ago. I think it was 2 years ago. And it's really lovely. And especially if you love video games, you know, it's advertising this accessible a piece of assistive technology that helps gamers, you know, engage. And in this particular case, I love that they show an example where it's unclear if their friend has just gotten a new high score for the neighborhood, or if he's just on the game for the first time, or they leave it very open-ended, which I think is really great. But that's just one example about how kids are having access in ways and getting access in ways that they previously did not have access. And I talked about Dragon Naturally Speaking. I talked about ALEXA. I don't want yours to go off. But think about the uses of these, even as if students are virtually learning. You know, students that can use it to check their mathematics. I work with a student with autism that has a lot of repetitive speech. And so when he comes home from school, he goes into, you know, what's the weather? What's on television tonight? When do the Cubs play? You know, all these questions. And now he can go to Alexa and he can be more independent, and he can ask his questions, get those same satisfying answers, you know, from his personal assistant. And he can do that without having to interact with anybody. Or having to ask 3 different people to get there. So, so there's lots of potential there that we didn't see before. You know, adapted keyboards, all of these are examples. I even made this little tap light for a student with cerebral palsy. This is kind of lower tech, but I got from the dollar store, where I just put a little hand on there. And if he was fatigued at raising his hand, he could just hit the tap light, and the teacher would know if the light's on that Tim has something that he's ready to share. So these are all examples that, you know, many of them I think that we will see more and more of as we go into these different kinds of lessons, and that we want teachers to start thinking about what are the range of options that you use right now, and have them set modest goals for growing, you know, what they already have, and try to get them to kind of expand those menus. And some of them, they'll, you know, again, in the past years where people might have been very nervous about that, I think the elegance of some of these options, it's going to be intriguing, and we're gonna reel people in. Let me see if I can get this. Yeah, let me try this. I want to show you two different versions of math manipulatives. So part of this is options and expression is, again, as I said, introducing kids to new tools and also finding a way in. So it's not that the old school stuff is the wrong way. Some of you are going to do porch drops or have kids pick up materials. And some of your students will need physical schedules, and they will need manipulatives to work with, whether that's in classrooms or at home. But we can also use this time to get our teachers intrigued about some of these virtual pieces. So this is from a website called The Techie Teacher. T-E-C-H-I-E, The Techie Teacher. And she's created what we call these Bitmoji classrooms, right? Where they overlay these images, but create graphics so that's not just so that they're whimsical, but also so that students can easily find what they need. So she's got this gorgeous graphic, and you can go in, or a student can go in and decide that they want to get to the play money. And when they tap on that Bitmoji classroom, it brings them to a website that has that manipulative. So you see it there. So imagine that you are modeling this, you know, in 15 minutes during an activity. Again, a lot of teachers will find this just compelling enough that they'll want to try it themselves and introduce it to their students. And she's got many different websites that, you know, that she's featuring here. So we're going to go to the geo boards there, and then students can work from the geo boards. So this is free to use for anybody. It's just on our website, The Techie Teacher. And teachers, actually, believe it or not, can make their own Bitmoji classrooms to have kids access a whole host of things. So this is what I mean by just the bite-sized PD, or doing some of this in Flipgrid, so that they can see, oh yeah, that's not overwhelming. I can see how it's helpful to a lot of different students, that kind of thing. Yeah, Whitney said the plethora of digital tools that have come out in the last few months, and the digital versions of materials has been amazing. I agree. I think it's a game changer for teachers looking for resources. It can take time to track these things down. Absolutely. So without giving you one more thing to look at, and thanks Whitney for putting that link in for Corinne, is one thing is we can look at is a place to collect the resources. So two things to answer that. One is, and again, I'm going to give you another thing to learn, but it's very easy. It's something called Wakelet, like waking up, Wakelet, and I think it is wakelet.com. But Wakelet is kind of like an easier Pinterest. And it's very easy for us to collaborate and just house things. So when I see really great things that I want to share, I make my little Wakelet. And it's something that you could have for all of your teachers. There could be a Wakelet just for manipulatives. You could have a Wakelet just for great visuals. So that's something that you could look at as a way to store this. And the other thing I would tell teachers is just pick a few, just like I told you today. You don't have to pick everything, but knowing that it's out there and finding some compelling ways to introduce them might get them to wet their whistle so that they want to do some of this on their own. And that's, you know, my interest in this is saying, how do we get people to kind of do some of this exploration? I am not somebody, you know, I'm just like many of you, I'm just learning as I go. It's been a massive learning curve. So these are all just things that, you know, I'm kind of figuring out a little bit of time as well. But it's also important that we emphasize the physical manipulatives are still important. UDL basically says kids get to have choices, and there's a lot of options available. The last thing I want to say about this particular category of expression is to really help our teachers understand that this isn't just about kids with the most complex needs. And one of the examples I'm going to give you a little bit later, I think outlines quite nicely that universal design should help us think about every child, and we should be bringing down barriers that we don't even know exist. In other words, there are students out there that can do the work just fine, but they might be more motivated, they might show up even stronger if we put these principles into play. So for example, my daughter's 8th grade teacher in social studies, about 4 weeks left of school, maybe 3, said, you know what, if you don't want to do what we're doing and you want to kind of change up what we're, you know, what you're experiencing in here, and you can have a choice. You can keep going with the curriculum until the end of the year, or you can do something that you want to do. And essentially inviting this, you know, this creative spirit. And I think this is another one of the possibilities for the time that we're in right now, is letting kids be agents. And one of the things that we know about the engagement fraction of this equation is that if you really want kids to be engaged, follow what they love. So what they had to do was look at World War II to 2015. I mean, it's massive, and pick something. Pick one thing to help you learn about American history. And she did something she's never done before. She made a website about the women's liberation movement. And it had her exploring tons of resources, doing a lot of research. But here's what's as important. She made her first website. And I'll say it again, in a time when students, the most important thing is that they learn to learn. I was as impressed that she learned that competency as I was impressed that she learned the material. Both are really critical. And that's true of kids with disabilities, that they learn a lot of different skills and competencies, including things related to augmentative communication, and assistive technology, and so on. All right. So thank you for putting Wakelet up, Whitney. You're my unofficial or official assistant. Okay. Yeah, I like this. What's good for students with disabilities and ELLs has always been good for students. Yes, we have to, and we can build on that, because we can say, who would you use this for, right? And just remind them that they have, that the entry point is a lot of the students in our care. So let's not forget the students that we started with. All right, so let's go back and talk about the what of learning. So the what of learning is sort of like, I'm simplifying this, but it's sort of like, if expression is largely what they do, then representation is largely what we do. What do I give you? What am I showing you? How am I helping with your comprehension? How am I making those connections? And how am I providing scaffolds so that you can get it? That's kind of representation. So let me just go through a couple of different tools here. That's everything from having these kinds of tools that I've been showing. You know, maybe I'm doing a think aloud as I'm reading, and I can demonstrate to you, this is what I'm saying, but this is what I'm thinking. Maybe for my younger children, you know, having what I kind of call them handheld emojis will actually help them remember, it's time for the teacher to talk, or let's stop the activity that we're engaged in, or let's sit down from our dance, or what have you. That's all representation. And in the old school ways, meaning March, that could be anything from, you know, I always talk about wearing these, I always bring with me to almost every talk my human billboard. And so I might wear noun, verbs, adjectives. I might wear the definition of an acute angle. But I often, you know, bring this idea to teachers, and I say it's an unusual place to find information. So it's whimsical, it's funny, there's novelty to it. And so the other day I was saying, wouldn't it be fun if we now adopted headbands instead? That as we're teaching a lesson, we can be wearing a headband with that rhyming word, or with that vocabulary, that reminder. Somebody else said, how about putting heavy different coffee cups or stickers on your coffee mug? I said, well, that's funny too. Walk it to know it is in here, you know, having these different plotted paths. So it could be anything from the order of the planets to the steps of infant CPR for a health teacher. And what I thought was a good connection for where we are today is, we saw after the quarantine, people were, occupational therapists in particular, were running around communities and having, you know, drawing out obstacle courses with sidewalk chalk. And I thought, wouldn't it be a fun repetitive homework assignment to have kids create their own walk it to know it's with sidewalk chalk, and then send in photographs to share with the teacher. Like, here, I made this for the chronology of, you know, the American Civil Rights Movement, or I made this, you know, I made my own version of skip counting, or number line, or the alphabet. So we can translate these pieces, and I think that creativity of doing that will create that elasticity we talked about before, and maybe we'll have that lasting benefit when we get back to the classroom. It'll still be there. I threw this in too, because this morning a big part of our conversation was about how we need to help folks understand the different, how we can have high expectations for kids with disabilities, and what academic content can look like for those kids. So here I have 2 things I've made recently. This is a biology coloring book, as you can see, and as somebody said, good for all kids. And then this little puzzle, and I call these purposeful fidgets. When we first went into this new quarantine, first couple weeks, I said a lot of kids won't be able to sit with synchronous learning. How can we create fidgets and materials that they can sit with that actually help them to connect to the learning itself, so that a general ed teacher could say, oh yeah, I see that he's following along with this, and you know exactly what happened, all of you that are commenting. Of course, what happened was the teacher said, I want a copy of that downloadable coloring book for everybody. Why wouldn't I give that to everybody? Indeed, especially since we know that kids who doodle in color remember more than those that don't. And that's a study from a woman named Andrade, Andrade. It kind of spawned a lot of different literature about how we should celebrate doodling. And the puzzle on the left, I had 10 of those made by a paraprofessional who was very artistic. And when the student kind of was participating but couldn't sit with the content anymore, he could assemble a puzzle that was related to those mini lessons. So sometimes, here's the thing, teachers are learners too. So some of the things that I might do with these materials is, just give lots and lots of examples. Maybe it's 1 or 2 or 3 examples during each, get together or meeting, so that you don't have to use everything, but what's one new idea here that you could take with you? I couldn't resist throwing in my little coaster here. Here's another representation example. All of these great read alouds that are now being made available. So just want to let you know, if you do have students that have wheels, they might like this. This is a book that I just came out in December. It's a little book I wrote about a puppy with wheels. And as soon as we went into quarantine, I created my own version of it. You can find it on YouTube or on my website. I read the book, and I own the copyright. So anybody that wants to use it for their kids can use it for any purpose. You don't have to ask permission because it's just me. You don't have to answer to anybody else. But there's 2 different versions. We can have the audio version, or kids can have physical materials in their hands, right? And so I'll add another element to that. You can add to an engagement element to this by having different people in the school reading the books. Maybe some kids want the custodian to read to them. Maybe some kids would like to be read to by a librarian who they had a big connection with, or lunch staff. So use all of the stakeholders in your communities to make these connections, and then you keep those relationships going too. Let's talk about closed captioning. For those of you that maybe are wondering where this sorcery is coming from and how I'm doing my captions, I'm going to show you. Bring it back. You can do it in Google Slides, and you can just do a very quick search for that. I'm going to just demonstrate in PowerPoint because I have PowerPoint here. If you have to have the newest version, and here's what I'll say: if you want to give the lowest hanging fruit to your staff, introduce this support, and you will automatically be helping emerging readers, students who are learning the language, students with disabilities. And I don't even think about it anymore. I never present without it. So what you're going to do is you're going to go to, get rid of my bar here, hold on. You're going to go to slideshow. And if you want to take a picture of this, I'll just wait a second. And all the way over to the right, I'll leave my cursor there in case you're taking a picture. If you have the latest version, you just check the box, always use subtitles. This will translate from English to Spanish. You can speak in Spanish, it will translate to English. Google has the same. I think PowerPoint's better as far as the translation element of it. I'm sure Google's working on that because they're Google. And the only thing is they don't have the translation yet. I'm sure that we're getting that. So that's another support. If you want to give the easiest version of this possible is saying that is a mode of representation. And what you're essentially saying is, is the way that I present you this information supportive? So if you can't get it through one mode, can you get it through another mode? If you can't get it through me speaking, can you see it? If you can't get it through the visual, Can I be speaking? So if I'm showing a visual, I might also have to talk through that visual, and that will support those learners. So again, these are just things that I don't think will go away. Everybody that's going to be using captioning during this time, they're going to keep using it. Once I learned it, I just put it on. So some of these things are what I call one and done. And that means from a UDL standpoint, I don't have to think about it anymore, right? I just use I use brain breaks when I present, when I teach, because people are sitting for a long time. So that's just going to be something that I embed. It's going to be one and done. I'm always going to have that as an option. All right. I also wanted to show you something kind of that you could translate. This is like using models and tactile support. So again, now we're thinking about kids with lower vision or kids with, you know, that are learning the language and need objects, realia, those kinds of things. So, you know, back at the classroom, we had objects that we could connect to, you know, when we're reading a story, or we could have a salt and flour map in the classroom. Now there may be objects we're going to drop off with kids. And I do think there's a lot of students with disabilities who are going to want to do that. But you can have kids make their own materials too. This is Canon. You know, the printer company has a website where kids can make all of these three-dimensional objects, pyramids, and I think they have like a sundial and all kinds of interesting things. But you can also, I say this is ideal for co-teaching, is thinking out of the box when it comes to models. So you may not be able to have kids feel a, you know, a model of the human heart, but while one of you is teaching, your co-teacher can be sort of dissecting that model, that plastic model of the human heart, and showing it off. I was thinking about vocabulary words during my lunch, and so I was thinking, oh, well, if a student didn't know you're reading a story and they don't know what binoculars are, you can actually, you know, you won't have all this in the classroom, but one of you can be showing off your binoculars. If that's a vocabulary word, you know, I grabbed my violin and I thought, oh yeah, one of you could be, you know, playing a little tune, maybe as you're demonstrating what is a violin, and if that's newer to somebody, you can still bring in models even though you're not right there. So having a few of those examples, once they have it, the idea that that's a good thing to do in teaching and they're needing it more than ever, I do think it will be compelling for a lot of educators to say, those are things I adopted once and I didn't let them go. And I think we're already starting to see some of that. One more that I want to share with you is my colleague, Julie. She's a math teacher, and she does a couple of interesting things in this video that I thought you would kind of get a kick out of. We're also going to need to know how to not just find tools, but we're going to need to figure out how to support our teachers in creating appropriate personalized tools. And some of them are getting very good at this right now with Screencast-O-Matic or Screencastify, or they're just making their own videos, or they're doing the Flipgrids. One of the things I think that, you know, is unique to this time is we're using this because of distance, but a lot of these tools they're finding kids find so interesting, and they're really meeting the needs of a lot of our diverse learners. So for example, a lot of our kids can watch these multiple times if needed. So I think the idea of flipping is going to be, I mean, huge, right, when we get back to face-to-face. So let's look at a little bit of Julie's video, and she made these years ago, so she was already there a while back. But pay attention to all the elements of UDL here. Oops.
Hello, today we are doing properties of exponents, starring Agent Brandolino and Taylor. Taylor is incoming 8th grader. We're not sure what team yet because we're doing this over the summer, but she wants to be either an FBI agent or a kindergarten teacher. FBI agent was much more fun. Who would want to be a teacher? It's crazy. I mean, really. So, here we go. All right, we're ready again. Okay, here we go. So, today we're going to do 3 things. We are going to multiply a power with the same base. We're going to divide a power with the same base. And we're going to do a power of a power. Okay? So, do you know what a power is?
Power is, I don't know.
Not sure. That's okay. That's why you're here, to learn. A power, it is a number that has a base and an exponent. So, an example. This is 4 over 2. Not 4 over 2. I like it. 4 to the second. So this here is the base. That's the big number. That's the bottom number. Starts with a B, base. The top number, the smaller number, is the exponent. And together with their forces combined, this whole thing is the power. I'm a good singer, I know.
Okay, so she does a lot there that fall into many different, that falls in a lot of categories, but these kinds of examples show us the potential and the richness. Imagine a student being able to watch this 4 or 5 times. She brings in a student and that student's special interest. What do you want to be when you grow up? She's really clear of sort of that meta of her teaching is write this down. This is important. And once again, I say, get your collaborative partners involved. Like who would work with you on creating some of these supports for students? So again, once we have even a catalog of these, not all of them need to be created from scratch every year. We can keep using those and improving upon them. So giving teachers some examples of things that won't be terribly overwhelming because they are, in a sense, they're one and done. Once we have these tools and we really like them and they're exciting to our students, we know we're going to be embedding them over time, especially when we start to see the possibilities of learning and outcomes for kids. I thought you would all really like this, and I thought it's a nice example, and feel free to use it, of kind of just taking this up one more notch, which is what does it look like to use this category of representation to build comprehension, so that we want the teachers to see this principle isn't just about having a great visual, although that's part of it. It's about making sure that kids, if I can use slang, that they're picking up what we're laying down, right? So I loved this story from Paul Hankins. He said a student is working on a narrative about her grandmother who has dementia. She was struggling, and I went to room 407 and I pulled 8 picture books related to the subject. And she looked at them and said, "Can I take these home to show my mom? The doctor only gave us a pamphlet." When I see the standards reference or indicate a variety of texts, do we recognize and appreciate that this could include picture books, illustrated text, graphic novels? I do, and I know you do too. It meant so much to this reader, this human, this granddaughter today. I love that story because in just 2 tweets, he really illustrates to us that, as you all keep saying, it's for everybody. But I think because UDL is so big, it's so massive, there's so much to it, that we almost can't give them enough exemplars. And I think the reason I gave you that 3-prong approach of you modeling, in other words, you're showing a lot, you're modeling, you want to pour in a lot of PD, and then finally you want them to teach each other, is because it's almost endless, what we can be sharing and what we can be showing. Okay, so I want to show you just a few more before our break. And again, to be a model, I'm going to ask you to join me in some breathing. So if we're going to really expect them to take this on, we have to model it in our meetings. We have to have elements of UDL in each one. So I'm going to count and not breathe. But what it looks like is you're going to breathe in for 4 seconds, and then I'll say hold and I'll count. So you're just not going to do anything. Then you'll breathe out for 4 and you'll hold for 4. Okay? So start by breathing in. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4. Out. 2, 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4. Breathe in. 2, 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4. Breathe out. 2, 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4. Great. That breathing square is one of many things that we can teach students. And it looks like it's something that's calming and relaxing, but it's something that you can actually use to give students some energy. And I know you'll need that at the end of the segment here. So to that end, a recommendation that I give in this engagement strategy, engagement is really anything that stimulates interest, keeps kids motivated, cultural relevance, personal relevance, using my special interest areas, helping me be calm, helping me learn how to regulate, making sure that there's games and fun, and maybe we're you know, doing our superhero stretches. All those things count in engagement. Even doing some giveaways. So you know what, while we're sitting here talking about it, I'm going to do some giveaways. Let's just do that since it's on my mind. I'm going to go to my chat. Oh no, I lost my chat. Huh, okay. Well, there it is. Okay, so just the first three names I see: Julie, Gluff, Sierra, if you're still here, and Whitney, first three names I saw. So Whitney, Sierra, I got more to give away too, but why not do some now? Whitney, Sierra, and what did I say? Julie, there you are. All you have to do is if I call your name, just go to paulakluth.com, the website, and go to contact me, and then just say, hey, send me that UDL book. We'll give away more too, but you know, let's keep this engagement going, everybody. All right. So let me tell you a few strategies in this. Mindful Schools is a great one, and every teacher could just learn 3 to 5 ideas, you know, for mindfulness. Whether that's just, hey, everybody, let's take a glass of water and let's just sit for a minute. Let's just breathe and let's just sit here. Or, hey, let's go around and just talk about some, you know, who's got a gratitude to share. Somebody wants to share something from their journal. So having a couple of strategies there can be really powerful. Earlier, I talked about using Flipgrid beyond the academics, and I said teachers can use it sort of as a talent show. So can kids. So not just having kids act out their problems, their math problems, or doing book chats, but how about having kids show off what they know? Let them teach skills and competencies to each other. And the teachers may learn some too, especially if some are tech related. Here's another example. Here's Raul Engel, co-teacher in California, who during synchronous learning was dressing up like his student special interest. So if any video game lover, I don't care if you're a first grader who doesn't even like video games, I mean, he looks fabulous, right? I mean, who wouldn't love that, essentially? Jiffies, Bitmojis, all those kinds of things. You know, this is adding in that element of fun. It's informal. For kids that it's kind of hits them where they live. You know, they're doing Snapchat, and this is familiar to them. And for a lot of students, we can bring in some of those things that they care about. You've got someone that loves the Minions and they love the Despicable Me, then you can sort of sample from those and bring them into lessons as, you know, metaphors or extensions or reinforcing ideas. I like using Bitmoji because I just think I look really, you know, together there. I feel like my you know, my hair is nice despite it being a pandemic. And then I also just wanted to talk a little bit about teaching. That's not what I want. Oh yeah, yeah, here he is. I want to talk about the different levels of challenge. So this is another part of UDL is saying, okay, what about a kid that can't do what that kid can do? So another part of engagement is really saying, is there something here for everybody? And so again, I think once we establish these tools, we won't go back. So making sure that teachers understand it's not just about everybody being able to do something, but that the level should be adjusted of support and of resources and challenge. If it's too hard, I'm not going to want to do it. So whether that's a paragraph frame, there's actually a website, I think I have it up, called Flippity. And Flippity is really fun because you can make your own cards, you can make your own memory game, you can make your own flashcards. I use a lot of alternative pencils because I teach a lot about literacy. So I made this set yesterday, my own set of magnets related to the planets. And you could have anything. You could have kids from your classroom's names. You could have a set about inclusive education and have teachers play with, you know, these kinds of tools during a PD. But really, the tool isn't so important as much as it is important to say that if you can't get, you know, poetry, magnetic poetry in their hands, that there's another way to do this, especially if kids have motor issues. And so, and another example I give there is the Story Starters from Scholastic, which is a fun tool. And I've had a lot of kids who use augmentative and alternative communication get a little bit more motivated when they get to spin a wheel and they get the characters that they're supposed to write about. You know, it's just a fun, high energy kind of activity. And so kids that don't want to touch a new device all of a sudden I can get them to write a story about something fairly ridiculous. So, you know, kind of giving some teachers ideas and sampling about what are your ideas for differentiating not only the level of challenge, but resources. What if kids need more? If they need something different, what can we do? That's when we bring in some of our co-teaching and do some co-planning together. We can use tools that do it for us. Newsela, and I know a lot of folks use this already, but I think this is just a great example of something that they probably do know, using Newsela to adjust the text so that students know, students can read it at their own level. And you can even see from this example on the screen here that one is clearly more complex than the other. And even from the title, that one, the reading level is lower. There are articles in Spanish. All of those things are my sort of, you know, even though that it's a representation example as well, it falls into engagement because it is the appropriate level of challenge for me. So all of these remind me of when I was a first-year teacher, and I would sit at home all night, and many of you probably did this too, and I would be gluing adapted text into the typical textbook. Boy, have we come a long way, right, about that. So, you know, these exist, and so we want to make sure that we're very gently helping teachers expand what they know to do so that they can not only meet the needs of the challenge in front of us, but that they continue to use this to give us those entry points and open those doors when we go back. Yeah, ReadWorks is great. Reading Vine, 2 other great resources. Thank you, Whitney. That's fantastic. And I'm sure you all have dozens and dozens. And that's the thing. It's like we want to send the message through both our modeling, through our PD, and through teachers teaching each other. We'll never get to the end of it, but that's why kids need to learn these skills and not just the content, because there's always going to be new tools. You need enough tools at this time to get our kids, to help our kids be successful. You know, everything else is kind of icing on the cake. So I want to do a little, activity with you as our way out. And you know what else I think I'm going to do is, I think we're going to give away some rubber chickens too. Why not? I want, if you feel comfortable turning on your cameras, I would like you to grab any object. If you have a stuffed animal, if you have a little gadget sitting there, anything that's sitting on your desk, it doesn't have to be a rubber chicken. I don't know why I have random things here, but just grab, it could be a hairbrush. Just grab anything off of your desk. And if you feel comfortable at this point, turning on your camera, that would be great if we can get a couple people to do that so I can model something. Oh, good. Oh, it's so nice to see all of you. How fun. Okay. Just get my screen a little bit wider here. Wonderful. Wonderful. Hello, everybody. All right. So if you are interested, I need a couple of volunteers, and I actually have my chat on my phone now so I can follow it. And so we are going to play Pass the Chicken. You know, you may not have a chicken, but we can have kids grab a stuffed animal, a stuffed toy. They can grab a pen. And I just need 2 or 3 people as our way out of this activity. What we're going to do is just I'm going to give it a response, and then I'm going to pass this. And then let's say Jennifer goes first. Jennifer is going to grab it with her own toy, and she will now be, there you go. And then she'll be the one answering. So you have to unmute yourselves for this. So let's just get a couple of answers. And I just want to remind you of our goal for this segment was, how do we really lean big into UDL this year? Kimberly, that's so amazing. How do we lean way in this year through those 3 strategies? So all I want to hear from you in 1 or 2 sentences, it doesn't have to be big, but like it could be one of those 3 or something else. Are you interested in maybe more PD, formal or informal? Are you interested in more teach the teacher, in other words, them teaching each other? Or are you interested in trying some more modeling? And so any one of those. And what is C. Robinson? What is your first name? Can I don't want to call you, I could say.
My name, hi, Paula. I'm Karina.
Karina, oh, you're Karina. Karina, I just wanted to look up very quickly, and you're the winner of the rubber chickens, Karina. So I just want to grab a face right away. So to get me your address, just go to paulakluth.com, go to contact me, say Paula owes me chickens, and they'll be on the way. So let's play. Can I get a couple of volunteers? Just type in the box like I'll play, and then I will pass you my chicken. I'm gonna get them really close to you. It's kind of Creepy. I hear someone unmuted. Anybody ready to go? Okay, great. Oh God, so many. Great. Tim, where are you?
Right here.
Go
Got
ahead. I'm passing you the chicken. Go
Okay,
ahead.
so-
What's your idea?
And it turned into a rock.
Yes, it did.
And my idea is more of the modeling, because people have to see it first before they can digest it. So that's kind of my deal.
I love it. It doesn't have to be a big thing, right? The breathing one time, the brain break the next time, playing a game the next time. If we're willing to do it, they're willing to do it. I love that. Go ahead and pass it to Martha.
Okay, Martha, here it comes.
Oh, Martha, you just need to unmute.
Of course I do. Yep, I got my knitting. I'm really interested in some more PD and ongoing PD, and supporting PD also for the paraprofessionals so that they can be supporting in the classroom.
Yeah, I was doing PD on that yesterday, actually, and one of the things that they brought up was some of those things like holding up the objects, or they could be the one that's maybe they're modeling the game. So when you start to play the game, you pass to the paraprofessional so that they're modeling some of that for kids. They could be some that have your visuals. So one's teaching and one's kind of got the visual to remind our students. And they just had a lot of really nice ideas about that. They were even saying you could play this game in 2 groups. So, you know, 15 kids over here, 15 kids, we break into 2 smaller groups, and then more kids get to share. And I think all of those could be really appropriate for support staff. Thank you, Martha. Let's pass to Lisa. Kimberly's dog took the toy.
All right. Did you pass, Mark? If you didn't, okay, I got my circle. I'm interested in the more standard professional development, but also with the modeling, because one thing that I'm finding about UDL is people do it and they don't know they're doing it already. And they think they've got this mountain to climb, but they really have a much easier mountain to climb than they think they do. So just like you said, continuing pressing that UDL PD across the year, because then they can say, oh, I do that. I can see how I can differentiate that broader. So that's my idea.
Yeah, exactly. So Lisa, Martha, Tim, love your ideas. Kimberly's dog took her toy. Let's do this. Tim, Martha, Lisa, and Kimberly, go ahead, go to the website and tell, I'll send you a book. So go ahead and let Todd know, and we'll just say Paula owes me a book, and we'll send you that UDL book. Thank you for volunteering. To that point, I wrote an article about 8 years ago called Come to the Fair. And if those of you that still keep Ed Leadership for years and years, you probably have it on your shelf. Come to the Fair. And it was something I did in a Chicago public school where we took the exact same thing you're talking about. This was back in the differentiation days, but people didn't know what we were talking about. What do you mean differentiation? I don't do that. So what we did was we filled the entire lounge with physical examples, be those anchor charts. We had a video playing of some co-teaching. I mean, you name it. And it was really nice. And so the first year, we didn't get full participation, but the second year we did, because now people had vocabulary and examples. And that's why I was saying maybe having, using a Zoom call or a Flipgrid or something where everybody does 5-minute demonstrations of the thing that's really working for you. All of a sudden, either reluctant folks or folks that say, oh, I didn't even realize that was, that's showing those objects and those Aurelia, and you practicing vocabulary that way or acting it out here, that those were examples. And so now I can insert that into my model, and I can have a shared language with my colleagues. So I love your question. If you want that article, as I said, it translates beautifully to virtual. You should be able to find it at Leadership, Paula Kluth, and come to the Fair is what it's called. And it's a great point. All right, I'm behind. I wanted to be good about getting you to your breaks. So here's what I promise you. When you come back, we're going to have a little bit, I'm going to introduce the last topic. We're going to start to synthesize this. And I do want to spend some time in small groups talking about how we make this actionable. We will spend some time, I think you will enjoy some nice tools for self-determination and really helping our teachers connect this to such an important principle, you know, that's been at the heart of our work for many years, I'm sure. So get your water if you can, take a breath outside, engage in a little bit of movement, and I'll see you back here in 15 minutes. Chatting. All right, well, I'm going to get started. Hopefully you're back with me, and I just want to say thank you so much to those of you that hung in here till the end of the day. I just left and I did a little bit of a count, and guess what? I have enough books for everybody. So as a thank you for hanging in here with me, if you would like a copy of Universal Design Daily, and it could be something, as we talk about the little PD, you know, you could send out one little idea every single day, you know, just for inspiration. So give us a little while to get those out to the post office, but we will, if you're interested, you can all go to paulakluth.com. I have just enough for everybody who's left on this call. So, so go ahead and just send us a note, paulakluth.com, and go to contact me and just say, Paula said I could have a book, and we'll get that right out to you. Just give us your best address, okay? All right, well, that's fun. It's always good to start with free things. We're gonna now parlay that into a brain break so that I can keep you with me for the last hour. We're gonna be chatting each other up in a little bit as well, but this will kind of help us get organized, feel regulated, and it's an easy one that you can do with your staff, and even reluctant folks, it's not too, you know, rubber chicken oriented, silly that they wouldn't participate. So it's called Fraction Shake, and some of you may have done it with kids. We're gonna shake our limbs 8 times. You're gonna just follow my lead. So we're gonna shake 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, like so. And then we're gonna do that for each limb. And then we're gonna do 4s, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we're gonna do 2s, and then we're gonna do 1s, and we'll end with a clap. And that should just get us just enough to get through, okay? So starting with 8s, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You can stand if you want. I'm gonna do my legs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. 1, 1, 1, 1. Great. That one's called Fraction Shake. You could have one little virtual brain break every time you get together, and that could be a one and done. That's just what you're known for. You always model it. They always need it. Then they bring them back. So those are simple things that we know, no matter the context, it'll be helpful. So what I'd like to do is just end with a recommendation that isn't quite as sort of big or nuanced as some of the others, but I think is really important. And so the last thing I want to say about how we can create these inclusive experiences is talk about self-determination as a stepping stone, introducing people that are not, you know, in our field to this language of self-determination, helping folks understand that, you know, this isn't just for kids with disabilities, and everybody needs to learn self-direction and advocacy. So what is self-determination? When we are explaining this to especially our general ed colleagues, one of the ways that you can talk about it is my colleague Michael, maybe some of you work with Michael Waymeyer, talks about it as students being causal agents. And this is often misunderstood. We think about kids, self-determination is about goal setting specifically, or self-determination is about, you know, having agency in a very unique way. But really, you know, I like Michael's explanation better, that you're a causal agent. And sometimes people, they are self-determining with their behaviors. I don't want to do this, and I do want to do this. Or just with their personality, their tendencies, their passions, those kinds of things. So I want to show you a clip, and how many of you, just by, in the chat letting me know if you saw the film Peanut Butter Falcon. Did anybody see that movie, The Peanut Butter Falcon? I mean, it's a great film, and you're going to want to after you see this. It very nearly garnered an Oscar or two. It was definitely in the buzz. And it was written by these two guys that had met a bunch of people with disabilities. I think it was at a camp. And there was a guy there that said, I want to be in movies. And these two filmmakers looked at each other and said, who's going to tell them? You know, who's going to tell them that there aren't movies with people with Down syndrome in them? So we want to lean into the yes, though, right? So these filmmakers said, maybe we'll write a movie. And they did. They wrote a movie with Zach in mind. And Zach, it was kind of a fun little tidbit to this story is that his mom had to really fight for him to get into a high school for the arts. And so I'm sure he's probably their most famous alum at this point, which is really cool. So they made this movie about a guy with Down syndrome who's living in a nursing home, and he decides he does not want to live in a nursing home and he wants to pursue his passion, which is to go and meet his favorite wrestler and learn how to become a wrestler. And so he teams up with a guy that he meets who's also on the run, and that's Shia LaBeouf's character. And he's kind of committed a kind of a petty criminal act, and a nonviolent criminal act. And he's on the run, and they just find each other. And now they're on the run together, kind of getting to know each other. So sort of a buddy film. And this is a scene where Dakota Johnson, who's his caseworker, finds him. She's in trouble. She can't find him. And now she's finally found him. And I want you to look for the instance, and there's more than one, instances of self-determination.
Look, I could have you arrested for kidnapping. Okay?
Oh, you gonna have me arrested? How do you figure? You can't have me arrested. You run away. You kidnap a runaway. Come on, James. You said GW, didn't you?
I'm sure I could find some reason to arrest you.
And then, what do you want for him?
I'm not gonna sell him to you.
No. What do you want for his life? His future.
Why are you out? You don't know anything about him. Yes, of course I know about the
All right, so I
wrestling.
know something about him, don't I? So, you're a little late to the party. This is what's going on. I made a promise to him to give him that wrestling school in Aiden. You understand? I gave him my word, and I ain't going back down on my word. Now, you seem like a nice person. You care for him and all. You came all the way out here. Maybe it's because you like me. I don't know. Okay? And I'm offering you a favor. You can get on that raft with us and you can ride down there if you want.
No, we're not gonna hop on your little raft and cruise around down the river.
It's hot. You're confused. I'm not asking you.
Hey, Eleanor.
Oh!
I want to see saltwater redneck, and I don't want to go home.
So at the end, he says, I want to go and see this wrestler. So what are the two examples of self-determination that you see there? I mean, one is certainly him declaring, I want to go and see this wrestler that I admire. What's the other one?
He took away her agency. He took away her car or whatever.
Yeah, so it's like, you're not going anywhere. Well, yeah, that too. I thought that, what's your vision for him? I thought, I can't believe these guys who aren't even part of our world, wrote that. Whitney says, asking, what's your vision? So even Shia is kind of helping him and modeling that. And then we see his act of self-determination, which is, you're not going anywhere, and throwing the keys. And we see kids do that all the time. It's like, that's all I have is this behavior, and I'm going to show you exactly what I want, what I need, or, what my decision is, what my choice is. So I think, when this all started happening, this is the first thing I thought about was, we can't make people do things they don't want to do. And especially when families are so overworked or so busy, they were so overwhelmed this spring. And the number one recommendation to anybody that asked me, as I said, go with what the kids want to do right now, because we may not have a choice. That they are really at the center. We're not there to use all of the supports. We're not there to have the engaging lesson. So if somebody wants to go and do something, that might be the best way in. Talking about UDL and engagement is to say, all right, tell me more about what you want. Let's move in that direction. And certainly we see in this case, it worked. Not only did that get her involved in his case, but she started to see over the course of that film that no one was really listening to him. So one of Michael's, what I like about Michael's, his latest book is that it's an ASCD publication. So just like we saw that evolution with the supports in UDL and starting with disability. I mean, I can remember when Michael Waymeyer was writing books about self-determination, and those were ordered for special education classes. The fact that this is an ASCD book, tells us everything we need to know, that they are marketing this for all school leaders, and that self-determination has become a general ed thing. It has become something for everybody. And UDL has been a big part of that, because before, in our old models, differentiation or meeting the needs of kids was really about giving them access, giving kids access that didn't have access. Now, you know, this new model of meeting student needs is about that, but it's also that has this other level, which is let's put kids at the center. Let's have them be the meaning makers. Let's see what, you know, what choices they want to make. Let's see what tools they would choose for this. And so I love that now these ideas of teaching kids to teach themselves and helping kids make goals and develop plans and, you know, putting choices all over the place is becoming part and parcel to what education is. And all of these things, you know, we've known in our field for quite some time are incredibly critical. So I think this needs to be a buzzword for us this year, in my humble opinion. I think we need to be applauding self-determination. You know, once I get props, I really can't stop myself. Yeah, behaviors communication, says Lisa, yeah. And I think all these are so critical, asking what's your vision. You know what, and this is an aside, but I don't know if any of you ever knew the work of Marcia Forrest and Jack Veerpoint, but early on in our field in complex needs, there were these individuals who were, you know, they were talking about action plans and people making visions, especially for kids with significant disabilities. It was in the 80s and in the 90s. And I remember meeting Judith Snow, who was part of their group, and Judith had really significant disabilities and a lot of health needs. And I remember I was probably about 24 years old and I met her and I couldn't believe it. And I said to her, oh my gosh, I just love your books and articles about, you know, action plans and people make, you know, how it's so important to take for kids with disabilities and have them have a vision and have us plan their lives. And she was like, yeah, that's great. I'm glad you like it. But she said, have you ever done that for yourself? Have you ever done sort of this visioning exercise for yourself? And I thought, what is she talking about? I don't have a disability, but she was ahead of her time. And she was essentially saying, everybody should be able to answer that question. And I think that's what UDL is doing, is it's asking all kids to engage in some of this visioning and problem solving and creating, you know, whether that's a task analysis or just creating big goals for themselves, you know, big, hairy, audacious goals. And here's an example of that. Here's Cheryl, who's a colleague, and, you know, who said to me, you know, not only can you use this, but would you use this? In other words, would you tell people about my son? Here we're in the midst of COVID, and she said, you know, am I scared? Yes, but the dignity of risk comes first. And her son has worked his whole life for this. Here he is at football practice. He's not afraid of barriers. Can you imagine how many kids in our country with Down syndrome, intellectual disabilities? I mean, we could go on and on, where somebody said, I want to be on the football team. It's like, that's not for you, you know? So I love the image. Here's my friend Robin, who I just adore, and she just does such a good job documenting. Remember I talked about take pictures, take pictures, take pictures? And she and I have talked a lot about this. Let's document everything that works, because what parts of this will we be able to bring back for some kids? Which parts of this will we be able to celebrate for everybody? So there he is, flexible seating in his boat, sword on his back, engaged with his teacher. He's watching the lesson. And she wants the teacher to know, yeah, you might see that he's in his boat, but here he is doing what he needs to do. And now she'll be able to go, not that she doesn't have a supportive district, because she does, but when she'll go back to school, she'll say, here's all these examples of how he's able to do this work. Now, this is tangential, but some of you, especially as leaders, may find this compelling. Some of you will remember the Rafael Alberti case in the 1980s, and I want to say it's 85, or early 90s. And when that case, it made such a wave in our field, of course, and, you know, had this, one of the first times that we had this language about kids not having to earn their way into classrooms. You know, the judge was very eloquent about that. And one of the reasons that the Alberti family won their lawsuit and they were able to get Rafael into general education classrooms was because they had him in Sunday school. And when that case went to court, they were able to show images of Rafael in Sunday school. I mean, taking notes is probably a bit much, but, you know, raising his hand and, you know, listening to the teacher's directions and doing what the other kids are doing. And so now you've got this evidence, right? And people, other lawyers picked up on that. So when the other cases went to court, they said, are you in Sunday school? Do you go to any extracurriculars? You know, what other footage do you have? How does he learn at home? Do you have images of him reading? That really stuck with me. And so now in this time is another one of those instances where as we go back to face-to-face, and we're going to want to still have access to general ed classrooms and extracurriculars and experiences and high-level challenges and, you know, and appropriately challenging lessons, this documentation is going to be really helpful for us. Here's another little example, fun example from Steve Asbell, talking about his little guy. This is again within weeks of the quarantine. He said, my 5-year-old didn't want to learn today, and yet he drew this design for a Lego Technic vehicle behind my back. In other words, because he's supposed to be doing schoolwork. If you want an autistic kid to learn, let them lead the way, let them utilize their special interests. So even more than usual, we are going to have to make that the right answer. We're going to have, remember I talked about earlier, making something the right answer. And I think a la my daughter's 8th grade teacher, letting them have the right answer helps them to build a range of skills that they may be interested in, but it may also help them show up in a different way. Like, I didn't know you could stay with a project this long, and I didn't know you could make something like that. I didn't even know you were interested in that. So I want to show you this clip, and a lot of you probably know about Innovation Day under other names, but if you haven't seen a lot about it before, it's known as FedEx Day or 20% time. Schools call it different things. But when I would talk about this during my UDL presentations, you know, everybody would say, oh, I'd love to do that someday. So now I'm doing all kinds of UDL PD. You know, it's probably the #1 thing people want to talk about these days. And people are saying, I'm going to do that because now they feel like that time has arrived, and how. Let's take a look at Innovation Day.
We gotta work harder for each other, for the future, mama, we gotta work.
Today is Innovation Day. It's a very different day. You think outside the box. That means you don't get tagged by the teacher. It's different than the other days. To me, it means you get to make whatever you want. Today is a special day where you get to do whatever you want. I don't know what we call today. Today is Orientation Day. Do whatever you want day. You get to learn what you want to learn, and you don't get told what you want to learn. It's a day where you make whatever you want all day. We tell our own self what to do.
We're doing Innovation Day, and kids created a list about 2 weeks ago, and they could decide to make anything they wanted, and today their dreams are coming true.
It's Innovation Day, yay! Yes, like that big piano. He's making a piano in a box for kids who need to learn how to play piano and can't afford a piano.
Raise your hand if you have the glue. We got to put crust, and we put sauce and cheese and then some pepperoni, and then she put it in the oven. It's called Classic Shooter, and it's about there's these new allies, and you gotta shoot the red ones to make a model. Now we're trying to make a model of it. That's all.
You want to pick a fight? That ain't right. Bullying's not cool. You know wrong or right. Read a book. Go and right. If we all get along, it'll be all right. So listen to me and do good in school because bullying is not cool.
At the back of my dictionary, it had sign language, and I was really interested in it, so I wanted to learn sign language on Innovation Day. This is A. This is B.
All right, I'm going to stop it there. You get the idea, of course. And again, another one of those ideas of this is self-determination. In other words, it is mainstream. And when the teachers come to us and they're looking for direction and how to plan and how to design their instruction, and quite frankly, how to design the day, this is something that we can use as sort of the theme. You know, every time I talk to my director, every time I talk to my principal, they just keep saying, follow the kids, you know? And so it could be one of those mantras that we all not only use to help folks better understand self-determination now and in the future, but something that can help us drive something that we often assign to special ed that can help us maybe collaborate better and think a little bit about what that could look like in general ed. So if you want to formalize this a little bit, you are doing some PD, some mini PD, maybe this is your resource. If you've never been to selfdetermination.org, one really specific tool that you will find to help is this interactive assessment. It doesn't take long, and it just it gets at some questions, some basic questions that will help with that greater vision. And I think it just brings awareness to any staff about, when we talk about self-determination, are we even on the same page? So feel free to use some of these examples as things that can be, our catalyst for the kinds of things that we'll be doing throughout the year and hopefully beyond. All right, so it would be really nice to break out into our groups now, and I'd like to spend about 15 minutes. Let's do about 12. I think maybe then I can come back and just share one last thing with you. We're going to go into some slightly larger groups. I'm going to join 2, at least 1. And what I want you to talk about is this. I want you to talk about, did you find anything to use? Did you find anything to share? And did you find any resources? And we should have about, if we do about, 2 or 3 minutes per person. So you could either have a timekeeper or just kind of loosely divide that up. But let's put 12 minutes on the clock, as they say. And let's see. Yeah. Oh, wait, I have more time than that. Yeah, we can do a little bit longer. Sorry, never mind. Yeah, we can do a little bit longer. I have until, how long do I have?
You're scheduled to go to 3:15, but you can stop anytime you want.
All right, so let's do about 12 minutes. That should be good. We can always keep the discussion open after that. So let's do about 12 minutes. I'll see you in there, some of you, and let's just talk about what we're taking away. Okay, can you hear me now? And did anybody, is there anybody that's still, please feel free to unmute yourself. We have such a nice small group here. If you didn't get to say something and you want to say something, please unmute yourself if there's something that you would like to share. My group was so much fun. If there's anybody anything you'd like to share, please feel free to do so. I want to be inclusive. All right, don't be shy. You sure? Okay. And let me just grab something.
Inclusive. My dog is included in this little thing we got going here. He's got a special needs, so he's a nutty dog.
Oh, I love it. We are all listen, we are all, you can read him. As you say, is your camera on?
Terry never has her camera on.
Okay. Oh, I didn't know that was you, Terry. Okay. Well, wonderful. So what I told everybody else is some of you, it's like Terry said, I don't want to turn the camera on. I'm doing some, some other things going on. But it's such a small, intimate group. And I'm so grateful that you stuck with me all day. I said, by the end, I might only have 2, but you were so lovely. So, in addition, I wanted to get you to the site so that you could see it, and have that connection. So if there are questions that come up as you're trying to do this, I would love to help you create, really, make this a hopefully a game-changing year for folks. And so if there's a way that I can help you with that, don't hesitate to drop me a line. I thought I would just do 2 things, and that is kind of remind you of some of those resources. This is, some of you might remember, maybe some of you don't, but I have a YouTube channel, and this is, when we talk about little bite-sized kinds of PD, you can get some of that on the YouTube channel. I'm not gonna, veer off of here because I want to make sure I stay with you here, but you can go to YouTube, it's just my name, and there's a channel, and I have not only some video that I just that I collect from other people, but there's 10 videos that I've made with this, under this language of off the page, which are just 5 to 7 minutes ideas for inclusive practice, or how to use fascinations in the classroom, or inclusive playgrounds. There's all kinds of things. So those might help you in 2 ways. They might, number 1, help you with some of your little mini PD, but it might also be a model for some of you who are thinking how to clone yourselves. And we were talking in my group about how to have maybe make some mantras out of this material today, where you say to yourself, you know, I really want to commit to this work this year because I know I'm never going to have an opportunity like this. So when I go back, what are the things I want them to hear from me? So we were saying, you know, self-determination should be at the center of everything we do. Put students in the middle. You know, everything comes back to UDL, strike while the iron's hot, especially for our special ed teachers. If they want to be compelling and bring in these partners, they're never going to have more enthusiasm or want around this topic. Maybe for you, it's going to be process, over, under, around, or through. So maybe you are the star of some videos, you know, TikTok is out there. So I don't know, maybe that's a way to be compelling. So check those out for either one of those reasons. Some of you know, I think somebody already posted today. Thank you, Whitney. You are my social media expert. Whitney's posting the YouTube channel there. I do have some things on Pinterest. I am on Instagram a little bit, but Twitter's where I do a lot of resource sharing. And I wanted to note to you that a couple of months ago, I would say I started in late March and I went for 50 days, 50 days. And I created one idea every day for virtual learning, starting with one of the first days of the quarantine. So if you go back in my Twitter account and you use the hashtag Paula Kluth homeschool help, I think that's it. Hashtag Paula Kluth homeschool help. You can use Facebook for that, or you can use Twitter for that hashtag. And it's nothing that you probably wouldn't have seen. It's just if you do have parents, families, folks who are looking for ways that they can adapt still, that may be a resource for some of you. So you could check that out. And again, Facebook is another place if you're on Facebook, that there's lots of things out there. And then of course, there's the website, paulakluth.com. You already know about that. And those are the main texts of the day, in case you're wondering. And that one on the right, you're already going to get. If you have the one on the left and you've already used that for something, just wanted to allude to the fact that one of the last blog posts, if not the last one that I put up, contains a little inclusion steering committee, a little goal planning form for that particular book. So if you're somebody that's actually going to use the year to really systematically work on getting your school to be more inclusive, and you're using that book in some way, download that form, because it's a way to kind of catalog, okay, let's start with, you know, extracurriculars. Let's really look at people co-planning or whatever it is. So that's just, I wanted to make sure that you knew that that was there for you to use. Okay, so if you were at the keynote last year, I shared this story and I thought it would be such a nice reminder of this self-determination. So I thought I would end with this story. And it's about a young lady that I met on the road, met her family at least on the road many years ago, and that she was wanting to go to high school. That was her kind of her voice, was I want to go have this experience. And she went into went into the planning process with other folks in middle school, and they kind of told her this is not for you. And so the mom came to this workshop, we start talking, and she's like, no, I'm going to pursue this for her. It's what she really wants. And the funny thing about their story and how I wrote about it was that she really wanted French. And here's a young lady with disabilities who's never been included before. And this is what she wants. She wants French. And so they decided to pursue that. So when they went to their high school meeting and they said, you know, what do you want? What are you thinking? Thinking that they would say something like maybe music or something that has more entry points, more obvious entry points. They said French. And the mom, Candy, said, I don't know why I said that. I just blurted this out, you know? And so they started pursuing French, and she started to learn, you know, and participate. And at one point the teacher came back and said, I don't really know. I don't know if she should be included or not. She's really not keeping up. And that's why I always talk about that UDL piece, right? Which is, you know, that is one of the major reasons I think kids lose their placement, is this complete misunderstanding of the gap and this complete misunderstanding of what's supposed to happen for kids with more complex support needs, and this complete misunderstanding of the public law. Your skills don't have to look like other kids' skills. As long as you are able to learn the adapted objectives that we have set out for you, and you can attack those IEP goals, you're in the right place, and the significance of your disability should have no bearing. And so they start to pursue this. And at one point, the teacher writes home and says, you know, I'm not sure if this is for her. Well, is she a behavior problem? No, nothing like that. But, you know, if you really wanted her to get, you know, communication skills and work on the things that are important for her, you know, perhaps she should be in science where there's a lot of dialogue, or perhaps she should be, you know, where she can learn these, you know, these kinds of skills of daily life. And they almost did switch her over. In fact, she did take some science. She started with a science class, but she still wanted to come back to French. And so at one point, the whole team said, oh, we just don't know about this. We don't know if we should reverse course. And at that point, Candy went to both of her daughters and said, you know, I don't know what to do. The older daughter had loved French, had loved this teacher. Candy really wanted to be in French, you know, and what do you think we should do? And that propelled Casey to go and grab her little flashcards, and she gives them to her sister, and they start to rehearse for little flashcards. And what they find is that she has really started to learn French. You know, the mom, Candy, had said, if she learns 10 words this year, I'll be happy. Like, I just want her to be included. I want her to have this experience that my other daughter had. French has dignity. Like, I just want her to be able to do something, to have a typical, you know, experience. And all of a sudden she's going and she's learning, you know, she said, I couldn't believe my eyes. I thought she'd learn 10 words by the end of the year. And here she was learning 10 words before the end of the first month. And what Candy said was, you know, being her mom, it was sort of shocking to me that even my expectations were too low. Like, I didn't see that coming. I didn't think that she was going to learn, you know, to speak French. I thought she would learn about France, and I thought she might like to talk to the kids, and that she might get to like how it, you know, what the, you know, that the language is beautiful, or that she might know that they speak French in France and in Canada. And she said, I am so thrilled to see her achievement, but I'm so ashamed of myself because I just didn't see it coming, and I'm her mother. And I think that's like a story. I love that story, because to me, that's a story of inclusive education. That's the same story of the history of inclusive education. In 1975, we still had kids in training schools. You know, we still talked, before 1990 and the reauthorization, we still talked about kids being in those classrooms for social reasons, and we didn't talk about academics at all. So it's been quite a journey to really get to this point where we understand what has actually happened in these 5 consecutive decades. And what we've actually found is that as kids get into these experiences and environments, that they start to blow us away. You know, what has happened is, since kids have gotten into these experiences, we have seen that they have not only learned to read, that was happening early on when we never expected that. Kids were learning academics that were unexpected. We've got Martinez, a researcher in Italy, who's teaching kids algebra, teaching kids with Down syndrome algebra and math. People have learned to drive. We've got students that would never have had those opportunities to get a driver's license previously. They're falling in love. Kids are going to college, not only through programs like Think College, but there's kids with some pretty complex support needs that actually are graduating with diplomas and you know, matriculating, that are accessing college based on their own academic records. None of this would have been possible without inclusive education. None of this would have been possible without us first saying, you don't have to prove your way in. We are going to provide a rich and robust context for you to show up looking strong. So I often share these gorgeous pictures of her and her little group here. And these are the girls that she ended up taking meteorology classes with. She's never been included before high school. It's never too early. It's never too late, right? And then she continued to learn aside these peers, graduated, you know, a lot of enthusiasm in this school for having, you know, this experience. Like, even the school community had not seen this before. And then these girls have continued to be very close, and I still get updates today. I'm still friends. And I said, this is a great review of the research of inclusive education. Kids who are included do better academically. We've seen that today. They have not as strong of research body on this, but we see that kids do better on their IEP objectives. We just don't have enough research. It's not that there's research that flies in the face of that. It's just we need more and more. We see that kids have more robust friendship networks. And, you know, this story kind of tells it all. But I love the element about Candy saying, even I didn't see it. Because to me, that shows that sometimes as educators, we have to push parents. Sometimes parents push us. We know that. Sometimes we have to push the parents, and we have to think about that dignity of risk. you know, what is possible, what is possible, what is possible. And this is a no time like the present. When we think about those 5 decades, in those 5 decades of research where we've only seen the expectations raise and therefore the potential of people raise, even in those 5 decades, we've never had an opportunity like this one. The things that have changed the field the most are not only our public laws, which have given kids access, but also a shift in attitudes as sort of this, you know, even the media has helped to change that, but technology has evolved, right? And part of that is the evolution of instruction and technology and what UDL has done. So everything is sort of working, not everything, but there's a lot working in our favor right now. There's a lot right there for the taking. So take parts of this, whatever parts of it you think will work for your team. And you're going to have your own mantras and your own messages. But one that I think would be powerful to bring back without a doubt is this one. And that is, this is a year to right a lot of wrongs. And certainly this is the year to go for it. So hopefully that, you know, resonates with you in some way. I want to thank you all for coming today. And I'm going to be here for another 10 minutes, just so you know, because I'm contracted to be here for another 10 minutes. And so if you do want to stay and chat, or if you want to talk in the chat, or if you want to ask a question, I'm going to be here. But for those of you that are on to other things, thank you for coming. I sure do appreciate it. And don't forget to go to the website and take what's rightfully yours. But I'll be hanging out. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful year, and an inclusive one too. You're welcome. You're welcome. You're welcome. You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you, Martha. I appreciate it. You too. Thanks, folks. And please, like I said, unmute yourself if you want to talk through things. I'm gonna stick around. So if there's anything you need.
And Paula, I'll leave this session open until you're ready to close it. So you just let me know.
Right. Yeah, I just want to go to 5:15 just in case people had planned that and they just want to say something.
Okay, great.
So Paula, this is Lisa Utz. I did leave you a little message in when I sent in for my new book about potentially scheduling some kind of PD with you, or finding out your input on different options for PD, because that's something I definitely want to do.
Yeah, I can help you. I can help you think through that for sure. And we will get to those immediately. In fact, I've got a little window here of work vacation where I'm just going to help process some of those requests and support. So I would love to do that, Lisa.
Awesome. I do have a kind of a separate question just to kind of ask about, and here's the example that I'm going to use. And actually, sorry, I should start my video so you can actually have a human to interact with.
Thank you. The high school principal has emailed me just today his new master schedule. And in terms of the way that we've done high school education, we have students that are kind of included across, and some kids that we have created classes for example, English and math, so that they can get their skill development as well as be in just what is considered an English class. And some of the things that we've done to make it more inclusive, I don't feel like it's entirely inclusive, but for example, in our English class, we use graphic novels. Yep. So we know that in 9th grade, they're studying this piece of literature. So in that English class, they're studying the same piece of literature, only they use a graphic novel to do it, get to the same kind of heart of everything, you know, that kind of thing. So I think, you know, we're heading in a good direction, but what I'm wondering about right now, since we're poised on the edge of this, where ODE is really pushing us all to be inclusive, I'm thinking my SPED teachers need to be more free during the day to do more case management and collaboration, because if they're available to all teachers to be a part of every lesson plan that one of the students who might be in that class might need an IEP goal addressed or something like that under the umbrella of that, if they don't have the time, if they're teaching 3 English classes and prepping for that in addition to doing case management, they're not going to have the time. Do people, when I think about this model, how do teachers, SPED teachers, co-teach, case manage? I mean, is co-teaching kind of a broad, it's not that they're in that classroom every single day. They're providing directives and directions, correct? Yeah, and I think, I mean, it depends on the students, and of course it depends on even the school structure, and you know, that's the thing about co-teaching and collaboration. I think there's, and you've heard this too, I'm sure, a million times, Lisa. It's like, well, that's not co-teaching because I don't get to be there bell to bell, or I don't, you know, this misconception that not only will it change from year to year because your students will change, but it could change from September to May because you lose a kid or that kid becomes more independent or whatever it is. So I think, you know, one of the things I think that's helpful in scoping out, and it sounds like you've pretty much already done this, but really looking at all of the resources, including kind of like looking at cross-categorically, what are all of those support teachers doing? Sometimes like ELL teachers will want to partner with us and say, well, you've got kids over there and I've got kids over there. And what's our speech path doing during that time? And if we have a reading specialist and our resource person. So really scoping out and looking at, you know, I think a lot of folks that do this consultation, especially around systems, that's where it starts, is kind of saying, don't leave anything out. Who's every, you know, name every adult in your building, name every kind of support, and really looking at what paraprofessionals are doing. You know, in some buildings, you'll have the resource teacher that's seen as sort of resource. That's the one that is going out and do some of the co-teaching. But then I find out there's 2 special ed teachers that never leave their classrooms, and they're each back with a couple of kids, you know, that have maybe different kinds of labels. And so it's like, what about those? Oh, they do something else. No, they don't. What if we bring everybody into this discussion? And then we can start to think about really personalizing and individualizing some of this. So I think it's going to be, it'll be tricky, but in some ways it's going to be also elegantly easy for some kids, because we're going to be able to, like, just by the shift of a monitor or in and out of a meeting, be able to quickly see what that child's doing. And, you know, you might have, if there's, or first of all, are you face to face?
No, we're going complete distance.
Yeah. So you could have students who are any of your kids coming to school, the kids with disabilities coming to school?
Not at this point, not until I get more guidance from ODE on what I can and can't do. I'm actually kind of contemplating creating a mobile classroom possibly, but I don't know. I don't know how to do that safely as well as logistically. So, but we do have some students who their parents are preferring to either opt out of any classroom interaction because they're, for example, we have a student who the parent has said, I don't want him to use his iPad at home because it creates a huge fight between the 2 of us, and his meltdowns become daily awful things that I have to deal with. We've all seen his meltdowns, so we all know it. We have a team of people that deal with the meltdowns. But in that case, you know, without some kind of actual human interface for that student, you know, we're going to have to get really outside the box on that one.
Yeah, like find ways that he's kind of contributing and engaging in projects that make their way back to the group in some way, but he might not be there in a synchronous moment. He may not, you know, it may not, the ritual, the routine may look very different.
Right.
And other tools may need to be used. I think what could be nice about this is it's the one time, I will say this, it is the one time that I would violate some natural proportions, especially in high school. So whereas normally I would say, oh, you can't put 4 kids with disabilities in that film class, kids with really, you know, obvious needs. But if that's the only way to pull it off right now, is to have like an assistant who's kind of in there full time, and the teacher's like gets why we're doing it now, and it's not something we plan on violating in the future. But since the physical presence isn't there as a barrier, you know, it doesn't, so it's not going to sort of manifest in the same ways as far as energy and resource. I think that is one principle that we can toy with a little bit, is saying, boy, there's quite a few kids that would like to access this. And so how can that look different? And then I would look at the kids that may not need as much support. And I would look at really expanding the possibilities. You know, this is the time to say, I have never thought about putting a kid in, you know, what's it called? What do you call it when you do a slam, poetry slam, whatever you call that? You know, I've never thought about putting a kid with really significant communication needs in something like that, but he really likes that, you know, stuff. And now he might really like that. And if he's really liking it, he just needs to kind of, you know, what we want for him is to kind of pay attention to that. And then once a week with a speech path, he's drafting something. And the rest of the time, he's just sort of more passive. He might not need a lot of support for that. So I would look at that catalog as if you've never seen it before. You know, kind of like the French thing. It's like, I never thought I'd be doing this. And not just that, but skipping tracks, doing new experiences. Some kids, maybe it's the most appropriate that they just do some peer interaction and tutoring. Maybe some kids are doing video games together as a tutorial. So they're starting with some reading together. Those things become hard in a typical high school day because we've got honors and kids they're so overworked. But again, if you put this call out to all your colleagues, what I'm telling all my high school teacher friends is leave no stone unturned. Tell everybody what you're looking for. I am looking for every kid that might want to, you know, tutor these students, who might want to be involved in a really unique way, who might want to have coffee clutch on Monday mornings, who might want to join a book club at this school, and just keep talking about it. You might have to make a flyer. You know, just put it out there and don't shut up about wanting to have these experiences and kids through the drama department, anybody. And then you can start to fill in backwards and say, some kids, maybe the kid that's really having emotional hard times, maybe there's 3 times in a day he connects with different kids. And my hope is if we do that, when we get back to school, those friendships are still there. Those are harder things to do when everybody's running in a bunch of directions, but now it might be appealing and appropriate. Just like anything else, you know, I'm talking to my cousin as an analogy. My cousin is a younger gal and she's got a little guy who's going through a lot, and she wants me to advocate for her. And she says, I don't want this, and they're trying to kick us out. And I said, well, you're not saying what you do want. Tell me what you want so I can help you. Tell me otherwise it's going to be what I want for him, you know? And she knows that. And I think the same as of this time and space for our teachers is let's dream big of our ideal. Is our ideal that every kid that we could, even if we fall short, that all of these kids get customized supports and they get as individualized as schedules as possible? Because one of my fears is that we end up with, you know, 10 students with disabilities, 2 peers that come to the call, and that's not inclusion, you know? So it's like really truly asking kids, like, what do you like to do? And is there a club for that? Or is there a class for that? And even if it can't sustain itself later, let's just go for it now anyway. And so really saying, okay, that's the ideal. How do we back into that for each kid? And then we kind of fill in with the schedules. And then we have to really be creative. There's a guy named Eric Carter. Do you know Eric? It's his first name is spelled E-R-I-K. But he's out of Vanderbilt, and he's written a ton on high school, using high school students. You know, it's controversial a little bit, but Eric, I think, does it the right way. And he's written a ton about it. There's a book about it. He's published a bunch of times, a lot of white papers about it. And it's about using high school students sort of almost as support folks. And some kids in his model even get some credits. And I know that's controversial, and I feel it can be done the wrong way. But Eric tries to really bring a lot of dignity to it and really makes it very collaborative. And he really has made the argument that it's a way to sustain a model that's often not sustainable. So that literature may be helpful. Whether or not you can launch something new this year is another question, but you get the idea. It might be something to continue this work long after when we can't.
One thing that kind of speaks to me, that was another question that I had for you, and that is, I as a general rule, I kind of push against too many one-on-one scenarios, because I feel like it's a learned helplessness that we create for a kid, and I feel like it's also a learned helplessness for parents, because they quit seeing their kid as an independent grower, right? That my kid should be getting independence. The video you showed about, was it Tushia? The fading of the supports that happened was fabulous, because the interactions that she started having with her peers were so much more genuine. And I feel like there's a lot of times when the knee-jerk response is any kid with an IEP, especially a kid with you know, what you might call a life skills type of IEP, they have to have a one-on-one aid. And I don't subscribe to that, period. Do you see that there has to be a dialogue about starting with it and fading it, or is it better just to kind of just go on in full guns?
Yeah, I would use this opportunity as your excuse. You know, I would say, like, we want to provide the fullest, most creative, you know, scheduling opportunity for instruction as possible. And that might mean looking to make this a real priority this year. You know, Mike Giangreco, who makes all those little cartoons about fate. Have you guys ever seen those cartoons? Corinne, have you seen those? Go to his website. You'll just do a Google search of Mike Giangreco, Giangreco, or GRENCCO, and paraprofessionals. So he's got this great website. He's done all these cartoons, but no one's written more white papers on this topic than Mike. And sometimes you can, and he's on his website, he's got all kinds of PDFs. You'll get all the PDFs for free. Like, you don't have to buy any, you know, I mean, they're easy to find. And so sometimes if you're finding this happening with parents, grab one of the articles, share it with them. He's got an article called Be Careful What You Wish For. And it's exactly summarizing what you said. And so, yes, I think it's a good time to do it, especially in high school. One of the things that we know is kids they're not employable. They're not as employable. So you can link it to all these kinds of things and say, this is the why of it. talk to our paraprofessionals about it. You know, I just did a whole training like 3 days ago just on, we were supposed to do all these topics and the director said, no, you're not doing those. 3 hours, I only want you to talk about fading and cues and all that stuff. So I was like, okay, you're the boss. And she was right. She's like, we don't have time for it. You're doing this. I'm like, you're right, because I've been there. I've been at her school and she's fought it. So I think that's really critical that they know the why. And then leaning into the UDL there, right? That's where the adapted work is so critical, because if you do think that the child's got to complete this big assignment and that they have to do exactly what everyone else does, of course you're doing hand over hand. Of course you have to always be there. If there's a repeating homework assignment of listening to a chapter on Audible every night, and that's success, then I can do that much more independently. If it's just that you're going to sit in and you're going to work on your coloring book, and that your biology coloring book, and that you're responsible for learning 2 facts this unit, I might not need support. But if I'm going to do this, if we're not adapting the work and we have to do what everybody else does, then you're going to make it perfect and cut and paste it. It's going to be gorgeous. And, you know, we all know, you know, we've all done that to our own kids enough, you know. So I think when parents and our paras really understand, when they have their eyes on the prize and they understand, you know, Corinna's going like this, like the employability aspect, and that we want kids to come out of this stronger. You know, that's been a cry of this, the last 5 months, is life skills for everybody. Teach them to cook, teach them to do all this stuff, teach them to fix the car. I mean, everyone's talking about that. So we can also use that as sort of a way in, is to say, we know that's critical for all, but it's really critical for these kids. And you can always back up and provide more if you have to. But I always tell the parents, we're not taking support away. Support is not always a person. And we have to, and I know I'm saying exactly what you said to people, but I always used to have a form and I said, if we take the personal support away first hour, here's the other things we might provide: adapted curriculum, peer support, a cue from the teacher, a timer, a check, you know what, so, but we have to get away from the idea that support means a person. And it doesn't, or that it could be a person, but maybe it's check-ins or it's the speech path coming in and doing something versus it being me. But I think you are so wise.
Totally agree with what you're saying, because it's so hard to undo that when you start with that, especially in early childhood or transitioning it into kindergarten. And this kiddo is, you know, here comes this kiddo with such behaviors. We've got to hire a one-on-one. And now he's 5th grade, stuck with this Miss Sally that's his interaction that he's had since kindergarten, and trying to undo that, because that's built into a school system, is so difficult. That's why I'm loving this opportunity that he doesn't have Miss Susie sitting next to him. We've got to find a way to figure out, how do we support him? He's nowhere near us. We can't reach him, touch him, but how do we reach him? How do we engage him? And what an opportunity to say he can do this without an adult in his lap.
And that's where I say document, document, document. For your parents that can do it, right? Not everybody can, and I understand there's some limitations, but say, oh, he was reading by himself. I'm seeing so many things on Twitter. That's why I met all these friends. I'm like, can I take a picture? Can I use that? He read his book for the first time. And actually, I did a research study 10 years ago, 12 years ago, and it was exactly about that. It was about kids with the most complex support needs who learned to read from their moms when they had never learned to read before. So things happen when, you know, the parents who have that local knowledge and they really understand the needs of that person, and all of a sudden it is customized in a way that's super smart because they have that knowledge. And so we're able to show a lot of these kids can read. And we have to understand that least dangerous assumption is sometimes it's the instruction, not because you don't care about the kid, you just haven't hit that perfect storm, right? So I think that you're absolutely right that happens. And one of the things that's a misconception, I think, with the teachers, and why I always make the teachers go to the para training,